Good afternoon. Welcome to BESE. This is academic goals. You do roll call.
Dr. Bosie? Here. Mr. Castillo? Dr. Davis? Here. Ms. Ellis? Here. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Ms. Holloway? Here. Mr. Mellering?
Here.
Mr. Morris?
Here.
Ms. Orange Jones? Here. Mr. Rock?
Here.
Ms. Bochet? Here. And Mr. Johnson?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Superintendent Brown, if you could, before we get started, I'd just like to take a moment and privilege here. Heard a lot of conversation today amongst the board members, particularly yesterday, I guess, first day of school, and can't be there with my child, you know, first day of school, and dad and mom are sending the pictures and so forth. So just want to recognize the board members here, my colleagues that are in that situation. Wishing they were home at the first day of school with their little one, with the bus or whatnot. And I just really sincerely appreciate you guys. Thank you for your commitment to the board. And I certainly enjoy working with you. So thank you so much for your commitment. All right, let's move on. First item, please.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3.
Your motion, so moved, Mr. Rock. Superintendent Bochet, thank you. This department has a thing. No questions or comments? Any objections? No objections, unheard, motion passes. Next item, please.
The first item is on page 2, item 3.1. Consideration of requests from local education agencies for waivers of policies contained in bulletins for the 2021-2022 school year, submitted by the State Superintendent of Education. The department recommendation is to approve the request submitted by EBR Parish School Systems to waive policy contained in bulletins 741 and 1530 as outlined, and approve the request submitted by St. Charles Parish School System to waive policy contained in bulletin 1706 as outlined.
Thank you. Members, can I get a motion? Superintendent Bochet, second. Mr. Garvey, thank you, sir. Superintendent, we have a few minutes here. Is that public comment?
No, sir.
Public comment. Any objections? None, motion passes. Thank you. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 10, item 3.2, consideration of an updated report regarding a kindergarten for the second grade K-2 accountability system. The department recommendation is to endorse the proposed K-2 accountability system as presented and direct the department to draft K-2 accountability policy based upon the K-2 accountability proposal.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Garvey.
this item has to do with the accountability system, making changes to it. The next item, 3.3, has to do with setting up a work group to work on similar issues. So I'd like to make a motion to defer on this item and on the other items that have to do with changes to the accountability system, which are 7.3, 7.5, 7.6, and 7.7. Defer to the next meeting.
Do I have a second? Mr. Miller? Any opposition to the motion? Superintendent Bochet?
Well, I think we had these similar motions on the agenda for the June meeting. And I'm looking at strength and diploma. We was a very large ask from the new enrollment task force for the Board of Regents and all of the entities together for it and asked us to revise the accountability formula with those policies in mind. And there's been a lot of work on K-2 accountability. I really don't know how much more we could discuss on these. I would just as soon move them forward at this particular point.
Other members, comments?
I
Dr.
guess
Davis?
for me, I would like to know what information is needed by my fellow board members that we haven't already given about these accountability changes? And what is the additional information that is needed to have a robust debate and discussion over the accountability changes?
Someone challenge?
I can speak to my own concerns. So I've shared some of these with Dr. Bromley as well. I just think, while I think it's taken individually, each piece of this may be conversations the board has had, I think what's missing is a comprehensive analysis of the entirety of how everything fits together, which isn't clear to me. I think there are still a lot of unanswered questions that analysis could likely bring. As you all know, as a board, I've been very vocal about wanting to basically prioritize more growth, conversations around growth, which I believe our current system does not necessarily adequately address to the fullest extent, especially when thinking about how to address the needs of our furthest behind students. I don't necessarily think that looked at in isolation is actually going to solve the issue. I think we need a more comprehensive analysis. I think there are unanswered questions, for example, around why, for example, as a distribution, our elementary schools have a different distribution than our high schools. I think there are, questions like that I think if we were to step back and look at the fullness of it, we'd have a more complete set of recommendations to bring forward. And right now, to me, it feels very piecemeal. So that's how I would address it. That's what I would say.
Any other comments? Jim Roman?
Yeah, I appreciate the motion, and I certainly want to get this right. I just want to call out for the board that only about 40% of our kids across the state by the end of 3rd grade can read on grade level. Also would call out we had legislation passed that mandated action around K-2 literacy. Call out that system leaders, who oftentimes are in opposition to additional accountability, unanimously have supported the idea around K-2 accountability. Further, it was approved unanimously by the Accountability Commission. I'm just concerned about a continued delay, although I understand and will, certainly listen to the will of the board. I just want to express my concerns around continuing to kick a can down the road when less than half of the kids in the state of Louisiana are reading at mastery level by the end of 3rd grade. I don't understand what would be piecemeal about a K-2 accountability system that we brought forward today, especially when it's conceptual. And we still have to work over the course of the next year to even bring back bulletins that directly relate to that proposal. Secondly, I would suggest that when we're talking about the high school experience, and particularly the strength of diploma opportunity that elevates dual enrollment, that we know certainly matters to our students, that elevates career and technical education, that we talk about all the time needing to matter. It's making our talk and our walk be the same. And so it just feels like we continue to not address the issue of elevating career and technical education, elevating the work of the dual enrollment task force. And so I just wanted to offer those comments around that, and I certainly respect your position, board member Jones. I just wanted to offer those because I think those two items in particular, K-2, and that strength of diploma and reinventing that high school experience for kids who need it to be ready on May 16th if they graduate May 15th. I just think those are really important and have seemingly had tremendous amount of support for those items.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Castillo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo what the superintendent just said. I'm deeply concerned that if we talk, and we've talked quite a bit about the fact that our approach needs to be one of cradle to career, cradle to college. And as it relates to item 3.2, I've just heard nothing but a universal desire to address the challenges of our state at as an early age as possible. And it is a measure, one measure, not the entire proposal, but it is indeed one that attempts to address the problem that has permeated throughout our state for quite some time. And it is a measure that I think will move us in the right direction. As it relates to 3.2, which is the item for consideration, I would humbly request that we give strong consideration to taking up this matter. There may be others that we may want to consider, but this, to me, seems to be low-hanging fruit, and that we should take an opportunity to pluck that fruit when given this opportunity for a second time to address it.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Mr. Garber?
Yeah, about the superintendent's concerns, my understanding is that we endorsed his direction on this issue back in, maybe we didn't endorse it, but he can continue to keep moving in this direction, and I believe he can, in fact, start drafting the accountability policy without us taking action today. So I don't think that this will slow us up in our movement to implement this later on.
Mr. Castillo?
Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully disagree, and I don't want to speak for the superintendent, but if we're asking and directing the department to move with all deliberate speed forward, why not fully endorse that and simply approve the item as it's been presented to us for consideration? To have the department to begin the drafting, to begin the promulgation, but without the full endorsement of the board seems to be a bit putting the cart before the horse.
Mr. Rock?
I concur with Mr. Castillo. I think it's time for us to endorse this move and move forward with the direction, process, so we can get this game out. So I'm in favor of this part.
Superintendent Brown?
Yeah, and to that, I would just add, we're talking about 2 years of work already of the dual enrollment task force on this strength of diploma issue. 2 years. 2 years where this board, even at the last meeting, sat here with your regent colleagues and said, yes, this is something we need to do. And high schools can't just flip quickly. Whenever you're talking about staffing, when you're talking about how you schedule, I mean, these things take time, and you're talking about a lead out in a few years before we even get there on the strength of diploma piece, on something that we sat here not a few months ago and discussed alongside regents of the working together and the partnership of birth through 16. And, you know, it was received well. It is a more rigorous process for high schools in terms of being thoughtful and how they work through their course sequencing. It actually tells students that you can go into career and technical education, and that matters just as much as if you choose a university pathway. And we've said that for a long time, but if we don't align to that, then I'm just really not sure we mean that. And so I would just be remiss if I didn't offer some degree of passion around these two items that started the whole process around accountability shields, of filling the void that clearly exists in K2. It exists. And then thinking about how our high schools are structured.
Thank you, Superintendent. Members, other comments? Ms. Orange-Jones?
Just a couple of follow-ups. So I think I share, certainly, and I'm sure all of us as a board share the same level of commitment and passion, particularly around K2 and programmatically. There are several initiatives underway, as we've heard this morning, that are actually incredibly promising. We had an incredibly promising legislative session as well. But we talked a lot about Mississippi. I'm curious, like, what role does K2 accountability play in the results of Mississippi? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, I often talk about how we are doing many of the things that Mississippi has done, but in many areas, I think we're being more aggressive than Mississippi.
So is K2 in Mississippi's plan?
No, I think it's not that I'm aware, but it is one of those areas where I would offer that we are being more aggressive, which aligns to the language I typically used around policies around K2.
Yeah, and so my perspective is, I think we do need to take a look at K2 accountability, but we keep making an analogy to an example that doesn't match, and I think we need more understanding of what does it actually look like? What are the points going to be? Like, there's more detail that I still don't think is here, and I don't know if this is true, you know, I don't know if you can confirm this, but my understanding is without us passing something formally as a policy, which in my opinion should be part of a comprehensive analysis of the entire formula, you still have the ability to actually move forward despite that and be able to provide those details to this board so they have all their information. The second thing is, over the past couple of months, we've had lots of conversation about the current formula, the accountability framework, have, you know, looked at different analyses. Some of our leadership members have been a part of those conversations, certainly. And I believe all of the analysis should be shared with this full board. I think a complete analysis should be shared with the board so that we can have an open conversation about the current state of our system and then decide what parts actually align to actually having the most progress for students. And I don't think that that's a conversation that as a board we've actually engaged in. We've engaged in pieces of it, and I'm not disagreeing that any of those pieces on their own right could not be promising, but I think it's very challenging to look at pieces without looking at an analysis of the whole, which I don't believe we've adequately done or been provided with that level of analysis. And so at this point, that's why my support can't be there.
So,
I echo comments and concerns by Mr. Lawrence Jones and Dr. Roman. You mentioned the word piecemeal, and you know that we're not one piecemeal to this accountability system that's so important to us. And our vision is to have a comprehensive, holistic accountability that we can see the whole with simulations and how does it affect our students. And help me understand the implementation. Like, you know, we have Dr. Pathways, and that's something we continue to work with a K-2. But this implementation, is it for this year with high school, or is this something that you're working on for the next 3 years, 5 years? Is that implementation?
I mean, I think that the practical side is that if we want, you're talking about high schools, if we want high schools to make adjustments in terms of the way they think about their personnel, the way they think about their funding, the way they think about their partnerships, you have to have an accountability system that incentivizes that. And that is particularly around the strength of diploma fees that you talked about. That is exactly what that does. And those are a few years out in terms of actually that going into implementation. But we just a couple of board meetings ago passed 39 new graduation pathways that, frankly, I commend the board. Like, these are some of the most innovative things happening in the country, where we can take students during their junior and senior year and say, you know what, we realize that only about half of seniors have a full day, have a full schedule, but we're paying public dollars for a full day. We have the opportunity during junior and senior year to partner with community colleges, and a kid can get an associate's degree, or they can earn a progression of courses over 2 years that align towards that. Or if they want to go into a career, they can go into a full apprenticeship and graduate high school as a level 2 electrician, and dually as a high school graduate. These are remarkable opportunities that we have in front of our kids, but without the incentivized piece of the accountability formula, I'm not certain the level of commitment that will exist in the field, because the field responds to the accountability formula.
Yeah, but I was just questioning the implementation, which you guys went in they have 3 years for implementation. I would believe that as an educator that it doesn't stop by delivering my implementation, what I have to offer is out there. The accountability system is based on scoring and how do we get to the point where can result in more of that. What is our outcome? And so that was the concern there about the implementation. Is it having to Does it have to happen this year, the implementation? Or we know that it's 3 years out, right? Implementation of high school.
And if you want a student to graduate with a clear progression of courses, or if you want them to graduate with an associate's degree or close to that, or if you want them to graduate with an apprenticeship, that doesn't happen starting in 11th grade. You know, you're going to have to think about what does middle school look like, and then how, whenever those kids hit 9th grade, do they start building that sequence of courses to make these things happen. And if we just keep deferring, we just keep losing school years when this could happen. Because it's not going to be, well, we make this change and all of a sudden, oh, our next senior class has X amount of apprenticeships and credentials and associate's degrees or courses that are coherent. It's going to take some time for that to happen. So that can be how we respond to that.
Superintendent Brown.
Yeah, I feel compelled to elaborate a little bit more on the strength of diplomat index. We have studied this extensively for 2 years with this dual enrollment task force. We went to every area of the state on this task force. Kim Hunter Reed from the North Regions, we had business and industry on the task force. We had educators on the task force, and Ken Bradford from the department is the liaison. We looked at statistics, over statistics, on board statistics, and studied it extensively. So we put together a program on dual enrollment that worked hand in hand with the CTE part of this. We looked at how do we increase these opportunities for kids. One of the recommendations out of the dual enrollment task force was to incorporate this into the strength of diplomat index and accountability. And what happens, even if we would approve this today, it applies to the cohort, the graduating cohort, I think of 23, 24, because these kids are coming in as freshmen. So the more we delay it, we're pushing them back more and more for that graduating cohort, because the students aren't going to just take advantage that when they get to be a senior, they're planning on their individual graduation plans, beginning at the middle school level and looking at those opportunities all throughout and adjusting it year by year. So I honestly feel we have studied this tremendously. The Fast Forward initiative with the associate degrees, we needed to value within the strength of diplomat index, the number of dual enrollment advanced placement and prep courses. So we've come up with what I thought was a very good indicator for college and career ready among our students. And further, we'll keep delaying and delaying it. I don't see a reason to. I don't know how much more we can study it. We've looked at it from every aspect. I guess I'm just a little bit disappointed. I thought we were going to do this in June. You said we delayed it until August to get more information. I was hoping that that information would be gotten to satisfy people in terms of what they felt they needed so that we could address this today. If this thing is going to be pushed back, and I would like it not to be pushed back, then I'd like some really hard and fast timelines on this. Because schools, just like every other large institution, you don't change on a dime. You don't one day institute something and then change it immediately. You're dealing with students. You're dealing with the progression of their educational career and their plans. You're dealing with their parents and their communities. So the more we delay this, I think the worse this becomes.
Other members? Dr. Davis?
You know, I'd like to echo Superintendent Bridgette's concerns about this. And I'd also like to say, you know, we solved this as one big package in June, and it got delayed and broken down into pieces, and now we're delaying it again. And I mean, it's no secret that I'm not a big fan of the K-2 piece of this and how it's designed, right? I mean, I've made those opinions clear, and so I know that if we voted on it today, it would not go the way that I wanted it to go, but we would have, at some point, we have to get to a decision point. And for those of you who feel like you need more information about these pieces and how they fit together, you know, we've had the Accountability Commission, SAC, and BESE, and multiple presentations around these pieces. And so I would urge every member of BESE that has not gotten the information that they think they need from the department to email Superintendent Brumley concrete things that you want to know so that we can alleviate this and move forward, because the delay costs districts the time that they need to be able to plan appropriately and to implement this, this new system, so.
Thank you, members. Any other comments before we go to public comments? Ms. Jones?
I just want to reiterate again, I think very important, passionate points have been made around elements of it. The reason why it doesn't feel comprehensive is because if you look at, for example, some of the earlier conversations we were even having around growth, my perspective is the proposal being put forward doesn't actually put us on a path to fundamentally address that. And in my opinion, like that component is as important as any other component that we actually address. And it can't be taken, it's not like there's more urgency, let's move on to this and this piece sort of is okay to sort of stall for the next 6 months. In my opinion, like we have to figure out how to look at it comprehensively and figure out how all of it can actually matter and move forward urgently. So I'm seeing like some things sort of carry over from June, others didn't carry over. It doesn't feel comprehensive enough for me to feel like I feel comfortable there.
Comment. Superintendent, we could just like take a moment and recognize a special guest in the room right now, Commissioner of Higher Education, Kim Hunter-Reed. Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to recognize you. We have a couple minutes for us, I'm sorry. Thank you.
All right, as a point of clarification, I've consulted, and I just need to let our board know that these items are noticed on the agenda individually with individual actions, and that we have public comment filed for each of these items, and so we will have to take these items individually. And so the items right now is just the 3.2 that came to accountability. We still have to allow public comment and any discussion that would occur on the individual items. So, Mr. Garvey, we're going to have to amend your deferral to just this item at this time. And
I move that we defer on this item until we hear back from the work group that is listed in item 3.3.
Can I get a second? Mr. Mallory?
so this is 3.2. Yes.
Thank you. And Nikki, thank you for that clarification.
So,
Commissioner, I apologize for the delay. Appreciate any comments you have to share with us.
she's talking about.
Apologize to, we've got some procedural corrections here. Originally, the motion was to defer the entire package, right? Now we're directed to work each individual component as is listed on the agenda. I think the item that we really want to speak to is item 7.4. 7.3, yes, the Superintendent Brown is right. So if you could really focus a little bit.
I sure will.
Thank you so much.
I'm from State's Houston.
All right, for everyone else in attendance, apologize for the confusion in the procedural order here. So we'll pick up from here. There's obviously a lot of folks interested in this topic, with a lot of passion behind their comments. But given the number of comment cards that we have, normally comments are 3 minutes for individuals and 5 minutes for individuals representing organizations. So we're going to go ahead and make that 2 minutes for individuals, 3 minutes for comments representing organizations. So if you would, collect your thoughts, and we're going to get started on the green cards. Thank you. The following order, if you could get the following folks to come to the table, I appreciate it. Dr. Sam Pope, Mr. Michael Fall, and next will be Ryan Roberts.
Okay, want to go first today?
You guys are regulars at this, but if you would identify yourself and organization groups.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. Janet Pope, LSBA Executive Director, Louisiana School Boards Association, representing 69 school systems and 643 school board members. The LSBA is in support of the creation of the K-2 accountability system. Yesterday, the LSBA stated that we are fervent believers in accountability. In surveys with our membership in school systems across the state, there was an overwhelming consensus that grades K-2 are an important educational component that should have a measure in accountability. And we thank the department and the state superintendent for their leadership and their effort. While the specific policies for K-2 have not been proposed, the LSBA would like to provide a few comments on things to consider moving forward in K-2 accountability. Literacy is an important factor in early learning, and we are in full support of standardized literacy assessment. Our hope is that assessment provides continuity from grades K-2 to grades 3 all the way through 11th grade, 12th grade, and that the literacy assessment is aligned to the grade 3 assessment, such that there is a seamless flow of information and measurement from one grade to the next. We are also hopeful that K-2 accountability will prioritize beginning of the year to the end of the year growth over our full year. We also realize that numeracy assessment has not yet been proposed as part of the K-2 accountability system, but we hope moving forward that numeracy becomes a valued component to the system. Finally, we hope to see more weight on early learning assessment and growth portion of this proposal with less emphasis on classroom observations in their environments, which tends to be subjective. We suspect that the data will show that students performing well on these assessments are being well served by their classroom environments. Thank you so much for your consideration today for K-2 assessments.
Thank you. Mr. Fall?
Michael Falk, Executive Director, Louisiana School Superintendents Association. Our association wholeheartedly endorses the concept of a K-2 accountability system. We realize that there is a little more work to be done, but we have a commitment, and has been shown by the department in the past, the involvement of stakeholders is key to formulating something that is meaningful and effective. These early years are the most important years in the formulation. And right now, we don't have anything that we can wrap our hands around. This will help us as we plan and prepare for students in grade 3 through 12 to provide a proper foundation that we can build upon. We cannot delay this any further. Our state has already been negligent in addressing this, and we need to address it now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ryan Roberts, followed by Ms. Bridgette Neal.
Thank you, members. My name is Ryan Roberts. I'm with the Pelican Institute for Public Policy. I want to start off by thanking y'all for allowing us to come and speak with y'all and have been addressing a lot of the concerns we have, especially Dr. Brumley for letting us talk with you through this whole process. We're working hard to make sure we can provide the best future for every Louisiana child. We endorse and support the motion by Member Garvey to defer this whole package until we can take a holistic approach to this. Student accountability is much too important. We have to take a whole approach to this to make sure that we're not piecemealing this. And using this time, we have to look at what a good accountability system looks like and refocus our measures to that. Student accountability, school accountability should be focused on student achievement, and it should be simple, transparent, and easy for parents to understand and educators to apply. Our current system does not meet these goals. It is overly complex and confusing. For example, we grade on a 150-point scale instead of a normal 100-point scale that all of our students use in the classroom. Also, our growth formula is so complex, there's so many different ways to play into this, when a simple measure of did the student go up a proficiency level or not would be a much easier and driven student achievement focused outcome. Now, we don't have to look far for examples of great school accountability systems. We just have to look to our neighbors in Mississippi that have done great things, and they're seeing great progress because of the accountability system they put in place. They moved from 50th to 23rd in 4th grade math. They moved from 50th to 28th in 4th grade reading, and this is easily attainable for us. I appreciate y'all taking up this important matter, and we look forward to working with you to continue on in this conversation to make sure we're setting up our children for bright futures in Louisiana. Thank you so much, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, sir. We've got Ms. Bridgette Neal, followed by Dr. Arthur Joe Creon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Bridgette Neal, and I'm with Stanford Children, Louisiana. I'm here in support of Member Garvey's motion. I do serve on the Accountability Commission, and we at STAN truly do support K-2 accountability. We've been waiting for a plan for years to make it a whole K-12 accountability system. We think that the framework, however, that has been brought forward is missing some very serious components, and that what is being presented is in need of addressing issues such as special education. How is what we're going to be approving will impact the scholarship program, the class model tool, things that are really critical and not just tweaks that will be made along the way. Further, without taking a holistic approach at the entirety of accountability, we don't know what and how K-2 is going to impact the overall formula. I am again a member of the Accountability Commission, and even though I really do enjoy my colleagues and I enjoy serving on that commission, I'm one of very few members that are on, that serve and that work outside of the education community. Even when votes are unanimous, that doesn't mean the conversation is not contentious at times. Those meetings, the videos are archived. I invite you to watch them and see the number of substitute motions and disagreements that do take place. In many cases, the members on that meeting, it seems as though in the education community, a point of view is they feel like they at times are accountable to each other rather than accountable to the public. At least that's sometimes the feeling I get when I'm serving in those meetings. Part of why the current accountability formula is so overly complicated, not transparent, difficult for systems to predict is, I think, because it's been tweaked and piecemealed into something that is designed to help, but is almost impossible to understand. And it's gotten to the point where few people really believe in any longer. And without taking a comprehensive approach, I don't know that we're making things better. I think we just continue to make things worse. And because in the interest of time, I filled out cards for the remainder of the items. I'll limit my remarks to this item. But I do appreciate all of your work and attention on all of these accountability issues. I know these are difficult questions, and I do thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Please identify yourself. And I've got Ms. Patty, Dr. Patty Glazer on deck.
Good afternoon. My name is Arthur Joe Creon. I'm the superintendent for the Iberville Parish School System. As a member of the Early Literacy Commission, as well as the committee who is currently establishing coursework recommendations for the science of reading, as well as a committee member for the Superintendent Advisory Committee, I am here to endorse the K-2 accountability proposal that is before you. While initially skeptical, the department staff was very receptive to all of the stakeholder groups, sought our input, and even made changes concerning some of the recommendations of the original proposal. They are now allowing the NIET rubric as well as the class rubric, something that we fought very diligently to ensure that we would not have to take and make drastic changes in our classrooms or have teachers have to learn a new system for their classroom observations. If we wish to see improved outcomes in our students and for our students, we have to begin with early childhood. We see gaps as early as our 3-year-old students. And if we're going to get different results, it's time for us to do something different. I do urge that you support this and allow the department staff to begin moving forward with their proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Dr. Glazer, and I've got Ms. Carolyn Roller on deck.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm Patty Glazer, CEO of Discovery Schools, chairperson of the Accountability Commission. I've come to talk about K-2 accountability. I am in favor of it. I am not in favor of postponing it at the current time. The commission studied it and considered it for an entire year. The commission voted unanimously to move forward. Of course, there were complicated conversations during the commission time. Every one of us is very passionate about kids and education and outcomes for those kids. I would expect nothing less than passionate conversations and important conversations. It's part of why we're on the commission. I'd also like to respectfully say to BESE members that there is a level of urgency in education that needs to be considered. The more we put things off, it doesn't help the kids we're educating today and tomorrow. It might help the kids we're educating 3 years from now. As Ms. Boche said, schools do not turn on a dime. We're already at my schools, and I am an on-the-boots ground educator, having the education of 2,700 kids. We're already preparing for this K-2 accountability. It's not going to happen overnight. I'm really not in favor of postponing it again. I was here at the June meeting, disappointed that it was postponed then, and rather surprised that it's being postponed or considered being postponed today. Again, I urge you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Caroline Romer, Executive Director of Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. As Dr. Glazer just pointed out, disappointed that we're continuing to have the same conversation. My testimony at your last meeting when you discussed this was I understood that there was a lot of questions, and I encourage you all to go back to the drawing board, get your questions answered, because I think this is too important of an issue for students and educators for you to be so divided. So it's disappointing that here we are, and you still seem to have lots of questions and divided. It does not send a good signal. And again, to those that are in schools right now doing everything they can to educate kids, and for us to continue to have what seem to be simple questions, I don't know where the breakdown is. Maybe it's just politics. Maybe there's a communications problem between the superintendent and BESE. I don't know. But as an organization, 150 charter schools throughout the state, we did not feel the proposal was a perfect proposal.
getting consensus amongst all of our schools on issues is impossible. There's always someone unhappy with something. But we have spent now, under my leadership at LAPCS, 14 years coming to this table talking about urgency and moving forward on behalf of students. And we have felt that way about accountability even when we felt like it was going to be harder for our schools to do it, scarier for our schools who fall under an accountability system that includes non-renewal when they don't get it right. So we have supported this package with some caveats that we wanted to see changed. And the department and Dr. Brumley have worked with our schools on some of those issues. Some have been mentioned. And again, coming from a charter school perspective, they do not like to be told how to do it. They like to be told what the standard and expectation is, and then be allowed to go do it. But they have agreed. My card was put in specifically for the K-2. They've agreed we have a problem in literacy, and it needs to be addressed today. And as far as Mississippi goes, Mississippi invested $100 million of philanthropic money in literacy. It's not an accountability issue. It is a money and resource issue that they've dedicated to literacy. And we've been having the same literacy conversation for generations. We urge you to go ahead and move forward. If we want to debate high school, fine. Go debate it. But K-2, it's time to do something. And as we said, we have time to work on it and hopefully perfect it, but don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. We want you to move forward on this today so our schools can start doing the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I've got Mr. Gordon Ford, followed by Mr. Barry Irwin.
I'll defer.
Mr. Ford, defer. I've got Mr. Barry Irwin, followed by Ms. Kayla Ratio. Mr. Irwin is deferring. Ms. Kayla Radio does not wish to speak. Information on. And lastly, I've got Kayla Moore, which is to speak.
Thank you all. Thank you all. My name is Caleb Moore. I'm the Louisiana Director of Government Affairs to the American Federation for Children. We support the motion by Member Garvey to defer and take a look at all the accountability measures before us today. While we've been able to provide feedback and we're very thankful for the conversations we've had, we still have major concerns that we think need to be addressed. We believe it's the right decision to defer all of the accountability measures until we can see the simulations and get more of the data. I believe that the accountability system was changed 2 years ago, and we don't have the data, especially with the still ongoing pandemic, to look at the changes that we've made and see if they've worked and see what's worked, take a deeper dive into that. As the organizational voice for school choice in Louisiana, we don't fully understand the implications of the new accountability measures on all fronts to the schools and the scholarship program. We still have questions we believe need to be answered. We want to take more opportunities to come together and look at the overarching accountability questions so we can make sure that we get this right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Members we've heard from the public, is there additional commentary from the board?
I have a presentation.
Superintendent Brown.
Thanks. I just want to take a moment and remind the board of where we stand and what it is that we're even talking about today in terms of the K-2 proposal. I think that's very reasonable. Louisiana ranks 48th in the nation among states on the 4th grade NAEP. And in fact, we heard commentary this morning asking us to set goals around what our NAEP results will be in a few years. Those goals were shared, and we're going to work with all our might to achieve those goals. But math assessments on the percentage of students who are proficiency or better are also listed. On LEAP 2025 assessments, 46% of third graders scored mastery or better on ELA, and 43% of third graders scored mastery or better on math. Across all literacy screeners, only about 40% of kindergartners scored on or above level in the fall of 2020. So, you know, regrettably, everyone admits we have a challenge in terms of literacy with our youngest learners. We know it's foundational. We're throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at trying to make it better every single day as a team. Louisiana's accountability system informs and focuses educators through clear expectations for student outcomes and provides objective information about school and site quality to parents and other community stakeholders. In developing tools to measure K-2 performance, this is what we're seeking to do. Define a cohesive set of expectations for teachers and school systems through grade 2. Utilize a limited, coherent, and efficient set of tools to monitor outcomes across school systems and schools. Provide maximum consistency across grade levels to support ease of use by educators and reflect the academic goals of K-2 in a way that schools are measured. We have some operational goals of the K-2 accountability system and development. 1, design a K-2 accountability system aligned to the department's academic strategy and state standards and bridges between early childhood and 3 to 12 accountability to create a cohesive early to 12th grade system. Pilot, refine, and scale K-2 accountability with full implementation of a learning year in 22-23 and full implementation in 23-24. Design and implement an improvement strategy aligned to ratings that drive literacy achievement for children in K-2 classrooms. The LDOE's Office of Teaching and Learning has identified proposed lenses through which to measure K-2 success in the accountability system, including a balance between measures of instructional quality and measuring student literacy. This is the system as it exists now. You know, we've heard a lot about adding to the system, needing to be more comprehensive, wanting something in a package that's together, but we can all admit over the last decade, there have been changes to the system, you know, year over year, that we have not started over. We've worked to make the system better, and that's what this system intends to do. If you look at K-2, it fills the void that presently exists in the system. Student literacy indicator proposal, this is where we have the request for proposals out and are trying to select a standardized literacy assessment across the whole state. Right now we have 4 different instruments that are used, and that just gives numbers, or that doesn't give anything that our teachers can actually use to drive instruction. And we're trying to select an instrument that will allow us to do that. Whenever we look at the accountability proposal, it would measure both performance and growth. Performance will be measured in grades K through 2 based on results of the end of year literacy indicator. A composite score will be generated at the end of each year for grades K, 1, and 2 that will indicate the extent to which a child is on track for reading on grade level. Growth will be measured in grades 1 and 2 based on results from the end of year indicator in literacy. Growth scores will be based on progress made from the end of year indicator results from the prior year to the end of year indicator results in the current year. The indicator features. The vendor for the literacy indicator will be selected via a competitive bid process. The literacy indicator will calculate a reading composite score upon administration of a battery of literacy measures. The literacy indicator will be constructed to yield valid and reliable results when reporting student performance and measuring growth. The indicator will be accessible for use by the widest possible range of students, including but not limited to students with disabilities and English learners. An alternative literacy indicator for students with significant cognitive disabilities is being explored as part of the process. The literacy indicator results will be captured in a web-based delivery platform. This may look like a student or a group of students taking the literacy indicator on the computer, or a teacher administering the indicator in a one-on-one setting and entering student responses into that platform. Here is a look at some of the skills that will be measured at various grade levels. This is a look at some of the training resources that we intend to provide over the next few years. Instructional quality would be determined by the class tool. Classes will be presently used in our early childhood centers to measure quality in early childhood centers. It's what's already being used. NIET rubric could also serve as an alternative rubric to class, as they're both nationally recognized. Every K-2 classroom will be observed through one of these rubrics once in the fall by a certified local observer. We would also do external observations of some of the classrooms by an external observer. Research background, you do that. This is a look at our current class pilot participation. This is something that we're already working through. You can see every year over time, we've increased the number of school systems and number of schools and number of classrooms that are participating in the class pilot. We have initial findings from that pilot. First of all, collaboration between pre-K and kindergarten teachers increased significantly, with teachers showing how they are using their curriculum to improve teacher-student interactions in those classrooms. For one school system, the percentage of incoming first grade students reading on or above grade level increased from 42 to 54% between fall of 18 and fall of 19. For one school system, within 9 months of starting class, most kindergarten teachers achieved LDOE's equivalent of highly proficient on the tool according to both local and third-party observers. This is a look at the rating scale. This is our initial structure for the accountability formula, and as I shared, this is conceptual, and over the course of time, we'll have to bring back bulletins that would solidify these numbers. We have a pilot year built in based on the timeline that we set forward. Here's the full timeline, beginning with last year, where we had our pilots in operation across the state. We've learned from those pilots. You heard about that this morning. We've heard about some of our actions as a result of that. 21-22, we see an increase of the pilot sites, increase of classrooms. 22-23, we built in a learning year. This also coincides with Senate Bill 216 by Meals that provides for the science of reading training for every K-3 teacher, as well as administrator, that we're going to fund at the department. And in 23-24, we would have full implementation of K-2 accountability at scale. So that's a look at the presentation. That is what this system looks like conceptually. Ultimately, we would be bringing back in the spring or the summer bulletins, which would take the proposal from a proposal to actual policy, and we recognize we have work to do along the way.
Thank you, Superintendent. Superintendent Brown, I had a couple of questions about the package. If we could go over that before we move on to the critical decision, I guess, the moment. I was curious about the class system and the NIET system. Why the department is recommending 2 modes as opposed to a standardized mode, which particularly creates some conflict and inherent credibility issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we intend to study as we move into that study year. We know that the class instrument is what is presently being used in our early childhood centers across the state. And so we have a sense of how we feel around that. We also know that as we're thinking about K-12, not early childhood, a number of systems throughout the state are moving to the NIET rubric, which is, you know, a rigorous rubric, and has seen tremendous results in systems. And so we didn't want to send mixed messages. Like if a system felt really strongly about one of the high-performing rubrics that they have, we want to honor that. And so we're certainly open to additional conversation around rubrics.
Thank you. The other question I had on the deck was with regard to the RFP and the age of the students that we're assessing. I've heard a lot of conversation in my year and a half on the board about students having difficulty transitioning to computer testing. I was curious at this age level, these assessments that are being done, are those computer-based? Do you guys plan for the RFP to specify computer-based testing, or what's that evaluation look like?
Yes, sir, that's accurate.
Can you explain me which part is accurate?
Well, I don't know exactly because we haven't selected the instrument, but our request was for it to be computer-based, so that's one of the components that we have to meet in order to respond to the request.
Thank you. So additional comments that I had, what I heard was a sense of urgency from the public as well as some members of the board. I was very glad to hear throughout the conversation today that the department has set some ambitious goals for our students. In addition, I heard comments with regard to existing complexity of the current system that's used and a concern to better understand that and gain confidence with our base case. Also heard that there was an interest to defer so that we could leverage a dedicated group to assess what's in place today and bring a better understanding back to the concerned members of the board. My question is, if the board did vote to defer this item, what would your next steps be, and how would that potentially impact the delivery of this item, and particularly relative to other items that are in progress now, with concerns for potentially creating a bottleneck or delaying other work?
Yeah, first of all, I find it interesting that we're talking again about piecemealing the accountability system when over decades we've added value to the system in different ways. When something wasn't where we wanted it to be, we've worked together, we've made a change in the accountability system. It's very clear that in K2 we have a void, we have a vacuum, and it's a place where we need to make a change. To your question, everything that we're doing is interconnected between the training of the teachers, the pilot programs, the coaching models, and everything is connected together on a timeline. And so that continued delay continues to be just that, a delay. And I don't understand it when, again, we're talking about, we still have to work through any concerns that you might have. We still have to bring back a bulletin. And, again, even though, as was mentioned earlier, a unanimous decision doesn't always mean everyone was perfectly happy. It was a unanimous decision, the accountability system. You have superintendents at the table saying, give me more accountability. When does that ever happen? We had superintendents sat before this board and said, give me more accountability. I think they recognize the importance, too, of making sure kids are where they need to be by the end of third grade. And I just feel like we're missing an opportunity to make generational change that's not just related to K2 accountability, but all the things that are tied to this.
I'd really like some help, though, with the concern for what a potential delay would impact. How long would it take, or would this actually slow down progress? It helps the board to appreciate, what the impact of that decision would be.
Yes, sir, Mr. Morris. My opinion is, and I recognize, and I'm going to submit to the will of the board, but I certainly do not advocate for delay. I certainly believe that we have a good proposal in front of you that's not perfect. And I think it's tied to so many other things that are happening within our literacy office and the way that we're communicating out and working with our schools.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Castillo?
Let me again sort of echo Ms. Romer's comments. I'm not sure she intended to do it, but she seems to be quoting Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. And I think that while we might be looking for perfection, which I certainly appreciate, we have an opportunity to do something that doesn't exist in our state. It does seem a little bit bizarre that the superintendents are saying, we want more accountability, and my good friends with the Pelican Institute and a few others are saying, let's slow things down, we don't need accountability quite so fast. I think we're in a position to do something that we have not done. It's important for the students of our state. We certainly can always come back and tweak it. We can make adjustments. But the only item before us, as Ms. Landry pointed out, is 3.2 for us to vote on. And we have an opportunity to put in place an accountability system that I think everyone would agree would better serve the students and families of the state of Louisiana. And I don't know that we gain anything by delaying this piece here. I understand that there are other pieces that there may be some unreadiness about. Frankly, I share some of those concerns. But as it relates to this particular piece here, normally the conversation is quite the contrary, and that there are those who are saying, we need accountability. I think that's right. I think we begin this program, and if we need to modify and adjust it, let's do that. because this is a living body. We can always make adjustments later. But I fear, and Mr. Superintendent, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that the delay, because we are looking for, in the words of the proponents of the motion by Mr. Garvey, a more comprehensive system, it's going to take a long time. We're going to be here next year having this conversation again, and still K2 will not have been addressed. As it relates to this particular item 3.2, I think it is ready for our consideration and frankly for our approval.
Thank you, sir. Members, other comments? Mr. Garvey?
Yeah, I need to try and get some clarity on some specifics here from the superintendent. The small scale, the items you have on this list, the small scale K2 class pilot, is that going to stop if we defer on this item today?
That has already happened.
Okay, the large scale K2 class pilot that's on here for this year, is that going to stop if we defer on this today?
That would not stop, but what I would offer, Mr. Garvey, is that we need clarity in terms of how we're moving forward. You know,
I think that will give us clarity.
These pilots are based on the fact of what this K2 model does. And so if we're going a different route than what this proposal says, then these pilots don't necessarily make sense. So I understand the level of question, I understand where you're trying to go, but I think it's a more nuanced, I think it's a more nuanced conversation than that, because the pilots are really dependent on the direction that we're receiving from the board.
So yes, that pilot will go through, will continue, it will happen this year.
It is presently happening.
Okay, the learning year of literacy indicators of class and NAEP observations. Will that happen in 22 and 23? Will it be prohibited from happening if we defer on this today?
Again, I understand the level of questioning, and I get that. But it's almost as if we're suggesting that we would continue to do something when we don't know that that's the direction of the model.
My point is, all of these things that you say you want to do, you can still do if we defer on this today.
We could continue to do those. I just don't know if it's fruitful, if ultimately the model is going to be a different model than what this describes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask the corollary to that line of questions. And that is, if indeed everyone believes that those three items and the questions that Mr. Garvey asked are good things, and that they're already being done, that we all agree that they should be done, why is it that this board is not willing to simply say, we agree, continue to do them, we support them. We support the department, we support the superintendents, and everyone's efforts to move this and advance it forward, if we all agree that it's being done and we think it's a good thing.
I'd like to answer that, is because we would like to see how this fits in with the whole accountability system.
So then are we suggesting that they should stop doing what they're doing now? We think that it should work.
The superintendent just answered that. He said all of these items will go forward.
But should we stop?
Mr. O'Shea?
But if they go forward and we change the rubric, then it will be meaningless. Right now, my district is participating in the large-scale K-2 class pilot. What that entailed was an entire summer of training all of our principals, assistant principals, and other people in evaluating in accordance with this rubric. Then it entails a massive training of all of our teachers as to know what to expect. And all of that is being done with the intention that this is going through and going to be part of the accountability system and be part of the continued movement what our kids are going to expect in class, what our teachers and what our principals and assistant principals expect. If we decide, we go ahead with it. It's not a question of is it going to continue. It could. But as the leader of my system, it's like, well, wait a minute. Are we gonna put our people through all of this training? Are we gonna put all of our teachers and administrators through this, sell it to them, talk about how it's great for kids, continue with it, and then, oh, well, maybe next spring, we come to the board and decide that's not exactly the direction we want to go in, because we're going to change it in relation to, I don't know what, other aspects or other pieces of the accountability system. So it's not a question of whether the pilot's going to continue. I mean, there are a few of us sitting out here right now, I know who are going to be participating in some of these, but I, as a leader, I mean, how do I lead my system if I don't know what the end game is going to be with this? And when we looked at this in June, that was one of the decisions I was making at that time. Would we proceed with it or would we not? And I honestly thought that we were going to take it up here in August. We had the information in June, and I didn't think this was going to be a piece that was going to stir this controversy. So we elected to proceed. So we spent an entire summer around getting ready for this pilot in K-2. And if this board or the Accountability Commission or whatever work group is put together comes back with something different in relation to the whole program, then how do we get uneducated and say, oh, well, we changed our minds. This is not something that is going to be good, and it's not the direction that we're taking our state in. So I think it is imperative that we make some of these decisions. Now, if you're talking about how does it weigh in the accountability system, right now, there's nothing proposed on here, to be honest, about saying what is the weight of it in the accountability system. We're not changing anything in the accountability system with this. What we're saying is we want to go through a K-2 initiative, and we're going to implement this. Whether we put it in the accountability system or not may be a decision for a different day. But are we proceeding with this as part of what our program is going to be? And that's a given that particular blessing today. Otherwise, we're going to have a whole, probably another year of delay. And I just don't see a reason. It doesn't make sense to me, because we've been talking about this thing. I'll be honest, we were talking about this prior to Superintendent Brown coming in office. You know, we've been talking about this for years, of how we were going to look at improving literacy in our K-2 grades. So I just don't see a reason for the delay. We've got most of the educators in the state being trained, moving forward, whether it's the NIET rubric or the class rubric. That's an evaluation rubric, but we're still going to have the same assessment for kids. The assessment is going to be different in some of the strategies that we use. But anyway, having said that, I guess we'll just have to see how it goes.
Members, other comments? Hearing none, we've got a motion on the floor. Can we get someone to read the motion again so we're clear on the motion before us?
Motion by Mr. Garvey, seconded by Mr. Mellering to defer item 3.2 until you have a date, until the next meeting.
Till we hear back from the committee that is reference to 3.3.
Wait.
The progress in the minutes.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that part.
Until we receive a report from the committee, the work group that is referenced in item 3.3.
So it's part of your motion to
So wait until that.
3.3 we're looking into this. And what is, do you have a timeline for reporting back?
No, I guess that would depend on how soon the superintendent can assemble that committee and have them work on this issue.
Superintendent,
So I would leave that to him for now.
Superintendent, that was the nature of my earlier question. You know, the alternative here is for the board to rely on item 3.3. dedicated crew would address the accountability system algorithm and everything included in it. But my understanding at 3.3 sits right now, that it's just going to address growth and not the entire accountability system. So there is an item before the board right now to address the growth component. But what I heard in the discussion today is there's an interest to address the entire accountability system. So I'm trying to get a sense of what that timeline would look like, how long something like that would take, and then if that would in fact defer the work of your team, then just like to fully appreciate what that would look like.
Yeah, I guess I would have to question the board there and just get a sense of what that means. You know, I've heard for a long time about the strength of our accountability model, and so what I'm hearing now are concerns about the strength of our accountability model that has nothing to do with the proposal before us today, but almost as if there are concerns about the accountability model as it presently exists. And I would just like to ask if that is in fact what I'm hearing from the board.
Comments on the concerns about the existing accountability system? Back to the.
Can we get clarity on this 3.3 in regards to this progress? I'm sorry.
Dr. Bromley, the kids accountability and the student growth index for K-8, that's not really the same thing?
No,
So I'm not sure how we would make the date
Yeah, so
contingent upon them if it's not, if we're not looking at
Mr. Chairman, so just, excuse me for a second. So just a point of clarification. I think the proposal here, the conversation we're trying to get to is that item 3.3 would be one part of the entire system accountability assessment that was mentioned previously. So there's already an item before the board that says, hey, let's go look at the growth component of the accountability system. That's going to take X amount of time, right? And we can talk about what if any impact that would have to continue work in progress. The conversation before the board right now is a little bit beyond item 3.3. That scope will be expanded to include the rest of the accountability system. So I was trying to use item 3.3 as a baseline to get the conversation started. If the growth component is going to take X amount of time, and the accountability system assessment would take X plus something else. So if you could give some consideration for what 3.3 would take in a matter of time, and we could start thinking about how much time it would take to address the rest of the system. That would get the conversation started.
So the majority of the concern, the controversy that we faced around the last set of recommendations had to do with growth. And it had to do with where the accountability commissions made a recommendation to increase growth from 25% to, I believe, 47%. You know, our team looked at that. We felt like that would be unstable for the system. And we said, what is national average? And that could be a point where this board could begin some conversations around. And rightfully so, I believe there was a decision to defer that until we could have further conversation. So a new recommendation on 3.3 is for the board president to appoint a subcommittee of the board that would work alongside the department, and we would contract out with some of the national experts throughout the country, psychometricians, experts on BAM, student growth, so that we could explore the current methodology for calculating growth in the state of Louisiana and make a determination, is that a good calculation methodology? And then make a determination if it's not, then what's a better one? And then along that conversation, you know, you also have to consider, you know, then what are the appropriate weights that go with these things? But that recommendation deals strictly with that growth piece. It is not a recommendation around K2. high school components. It is simply for that growth piece. And so we have a timeline on that that basically concludes in the spring of the year, because we don't think this is going to be an easy process. We think this is going to take some time. It's going to take some time to unpack. It's going to take time to help people understand and bring people along and try to build some level of consensus. So if you were then asking how long would it take to add these additional items or the entirety of the accountability formula, I don't have an answer for that at this point. I would have to explore that.
What I heard is being taxed from the next year. Dr. Davis?
And just to be clear, if we were to broaden, I know we're not even on this item yet, but if we were to broaden this change thing to address the entire accountability system, wouldn't that affect our ESSA plan that we currently have recently approved with the BESE? And how does that work?
Yes, we would have to make provide information to Ed around these changes and have them approved.
Other thoughts? Superintendent Roche?
Hi. We've been working, I can't even remember the first year, some of you all know, helping to put in this accountability system. And we have worked on this with all stakeholders, through the Accountability Commission, through business and industry, through community membership, through educators, as the year progressed. This didn't just start last year. We set goals, we took indicators that we felt would meet these particular goals. Now, if there's a sentiment out here that the entire accountability system, there is something wrong with it, and we have to reevaluate every component and throw it all out and basically start all over again to see what our goals are. This does not happen in 1 month, 2 months, or 6 months. This is a very long, it's just like coming up with a new MFP formula, or coming up, once you get your, quote, experts in and you start looking at what everybody else is doing, and you're looking at all the components, and you take Louisiana's goals to make our kids college and career ready, we have formed out pieces of this in many of the different commissions that we have set up. The College and Career Readiness Commission, the Dual Enrollment Task Force, the Accountability Commission. All of these groups have worked together, or maybe separately, for the common goal to feed into the Accountability Commission and the recommendations. I think we have a pretty good formula in place. Now, the piece I think that needs the most work is the growth piece. And the growth, I mean, we should have passed this thing in June in its entirety. And then if we thought that there needed to be major tweaks, empower a commission to take a look at what those major tweaks should be. But right now, as we sit today, I hate to see us not move forward, not only with just this piece of it, but we've already put mechanisms in place within our high schools and middle schools to get our kids to this college and career readiness mark. And to say we're going to take a step back and do months and more months of looking at this, we feel we need to look at the whole thing again, fine, empower a group to do that. But in the interim, let's take the work of what we've done the past year and a half to 2 years and put this into practice right now so that we can address the needs of the kids we currently have. And at the high school level, you're looking at this year's cohort coming in as freshmen that we need to work with to make sure that when they graduate 4 years from now, they're under what we're proposing, what I hope we are proposing today in terms of the enrollment programs, college and career readiness, and instructional. So I don't see a reason to delay it. If we want to look more extensively, then empower a group to look more extensively, but don't expect results back in less than a year as you go through this process.
Other comments? Hearing none. Yeah, I'd like to read the motion one more time, just so we're clear.
Okay, well, I still don't really know what clear is.
Yeah,
Yes.
so, that's a good idea, so let's get it clear, right?
Defer is a motion. To defer.
So we got a motion before the board to defer item 3.2 until
Just defer.
Defer until October, just to make it definite. Defer until October. Our October BESE meeting.
do I get a second for that motion?
Yes.
Mr. Miller, you got a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you have something to say.
Ms. Orange Jones, please.
No, just because, look, I just want to be clear, like, actually, let me start with a question. Superintendent, do you agree that more comprehensive changes should be made to the formula beyond growth? Based on your current understanding of the system?
I do, and I believe a couple of those areas would be K2 and particularly the strength of diplomas.
Would that be exhaustive? Would that be all of the changes you would recommend? If you could, in a perfect world, if you actually.
I definitely think that we need to take time to look at growth. I think that I've learned a lot about growth. I had an assumption of validity around growth that I think is now in question in a model that, that exists presently. But I definitely think, a couple of items would be K2 and the strength of diploma piece to align to the dual enrollment task force. And I believe that we need to study growth, we need to do it the right way, and we need to engage experts.
My question is, beyond growth, do you believe that there are other components of the system that we should be looking at that have not been addressed in the parts that have been implemented?
Yeah, the one other area the two other areas that I would suggest, which we included on one of our recommendations, has to do with high school persistence, as well as distribution. I've heard some people talk about, more high schools are A and B rated than elementary schools. I certainly think it's something that we should look at moving forward.
Yeah.
And we committed to doing that.
Right, and I have a tremendous sense of urgency, as I've had since the beginning of our conversations, specifically, personally, as a board member, about growth, right? And a different accounting and honest assessment of growth across our system, and how, in fact, we adequately capture the tremendous effort and work of educators and systems that are working with our farthest behind students. That is clear, and I've always been very explicit about that. It's also clear that there are other parts of the system that need to be looked at as well, right? I don't know that all board members have access to that information or data comprehensively. I think they should. I think the public should. I think we should have a rich conversation about lots of the components, not just growth, although growth to me seems the most straightforward personally, I think the way it should go up. But I understand that might be a conversation some board members want to address, but that's not the only thing. So I want to be really clear, this is not about slowing things down, stopping. It's about a comprehensive assessment, in my opinion, that the board shares so that we can be on the same page. And then basically situating the components that we're talking about today and growth and likely some other dimensions so that we have a real theory of action about what's going to advance the most progress for children, which is what we want to do. And I don't think we're there yet. I don't think that's currently the place. I personally don't believe we're there today.
So are you calling into question the accountability system that has been developed over decades in its entirety?
I think clearly you and I both know that we've been looking at data the last 2 months together, right? That you out of respect for you, I have not shared more broadly, but I hope that we can share and that the department will share with this entire board. And what we'll find is that there are many different components of the system that need another look. And with integrity, I am not comfortable voting for parts of this without the public and all of us being on the same page and clear about what the current system is. And I'm not going to move on that until I think that is clear. And I hope that when that happens, we take an honest approach to growth and recognize that appropriately, as I've said, but there are many other components that, in my opinion, we as a board have not discussed that are worthy of discussion. That's where I'm at today.
Ms. Rawson, could you help us with a roll call vote?
Yes. So yes, we're voting to defer.
Is there any objection to the vote?
Yes.
Ms. Rawson, could you give us a roll call vote?
All right, for the vote to defer, Dr. Bofi? Yes. Mr. Castile?
No.
Dr. Davis? No.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Ms. Holloway?
Yes.
Mr. Mallory?
Yes.
Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Rock?
No.
Ms. Bochet?
No.
Mr. Morris, would you like to vote?
No.
No.
No, you don't want to vote or
What's the tally right now?
6-5.
6, yeah, 6. Okay. All right, so the motion is deferred.
Next slide, please.
The next item is on page 10, the next item is on page 21, item 3.3, consideration of an update report regarding the progress index for student growth. The department recommendation is to approve the establishment of a work group to review the K-8 student growth accountability measure as outlined. Backup documentation has been distributed.
Again.
We have to get a motion to take it out there.
You know, members, earlier we recognized a special guest, Commissioner Reed with us today. She is here to speak on item 7.3. So as a courtesy to her, I'd ask that we have a motion to move that item forward. Mr. Gardner? So moved. Second. Mr. Miller? Opposed? Thank you, members.
Mr. Chairman, we have to have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
So now that we're taking 7.3, I'd like to move that we defer on item 7.3. To get the motion on the floor so that read it to the record and move forward.
The next item is on page 44, item 7.3, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, Louisiana School District and State Accountability System regarding the strength of diploma index. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent and authorize the LDE to make necessary revisions to the Louisiana ESSA state plan.
I move to defer on this item until October.
Do I have a second? Mr. Miller? Opposed?
Discussion and public comment.
I'm really honored to work alongside Commissioner Kim Hunter-Reed. She is an outstanding educator, and she makes me better by having the opportunity to work with her every day. And we have worked over longer than the last year, not just in dealing with how can we think about the global pandemic and keeping kids safe, both at early care facilities, K-12, but higher ed. But also we've worked around a number of issues with how to be more deliberate in the handoff between K-12 and higher ed. And we actually had some really exciting plans about how we could do more of that with dual enrollment in our counselors in the future. But I just want to take the opportunity, Commissioner Reed, to let you speak to why you feel that this particular item, the strength of the diploma item, is so important in relation particularly to the dual enrollment pathway.
Happy to do so. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to be here. Kim Hunter-Reed, Commissioner of Higher Education. Certainly appreciate Superintendent Brumley and the work. As you all know, our boards, the Board of Regents and BESE, have met for the last 2 years, every 6 months, and the steady item on the agenda has been dual enrollment. The conversation around how do we make sure that whether you are interested in welding or interested in accounting, that you have an opportunity to start college in high school. Doris Bochet sits on the dual enrollment task force. Certainly, people in this room, Janet Pope, Mike Falk, Barry Irwin, we have been at this work for 2 years and really excited about the work that lies ahead for us when it comes to doing that. We also have piloted with you the Fast Forward initiative so that more students will graduate high school with an associate degree.
And in February of 2020, we issued our first report to the legislature, to you all, to our board, and it asked that BESE take a look at the accountability system and the incentives that will ensure that more students and more schools and more districts are helping to drive these opportunities for students, more of them starting college and high school. And so I just wanted to make sure to be on the record to say the dual enrollment task force work is nested in this agenda item. We have great policy ideas, but they don't become a reality, as I learned from many of the stakeholders at the table, unless the accountability system is driving the kind of change that we want to see, which means educational opportunities for more students. So I just wanted to come to say that we were excited about 26,000 students in Louisiana pursuing dual enrollment. We know that we have 40,000 plus juniors and seniors, juniors in each class, about 40,000 plus. And so there are many more students who would benefit from this opportunity. So to the extent that you are looking to accelerate and put more energy into the work that we are doing, we are grateful. We know this will make a difference for students. We know that summer melt happens and not every student goes there, but we also know that the high school diploma is the floor, not the ceiling. So whatever we can do collectively to make sure that our policies are aligned and our accountability system is driving the kind of change that makes opportunity available for more Louisiana students, we are all in for that effort. And I know our boards have been working on this and talking about this and envisioning this work. And so I just wanted to have an opportunity, since it's on the agenda today, to share that information with all of you. And to thank you for giving me an opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Superintendent, you have a presentation? Comments?
I didn't know if anyone had questions.
Okay. Members, opportunity to address the Commissioner?
Is that the only public comment, or do you have a? Oh. No, well,
Associated?
no, I would just like to thank the Commissioner, Kim Hunter-Reed, has done an excellent job in leading this commission for the last 2 years. As she said, we made interim reports to the legislature concerning the progress we've made. It's been endorsed over and over again by the legislature. In fact, they're continuing our dual enrollment task force, which was supposed to sunset, because the work is so important to be done. We've come up, I think, with some wonderful recommendations, as we talked about before, in terms of visiting all of the campuses everywhere in every corner of the state, community college campuses, as well as the four-year institutions, and listen to the programs that they have and put together a fast forward initiative. This board sat with 4 regions and did this together and approved those pathways. And this piece of it now is the next step in showing how important it is to provide these opportunities for our students in K-12. It's going to help them become more productive members of the community. They will have college credit before they leave. It is a wonderful, wonderful program, and I hate to see this stall. So, well, I'm going to wait till after the rest of the public comment, but I just want to thank Dr. Kim Hunter for her efforts and her leadership in this endeavor.
Mr. Castillo?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Reed, I just want to thank you for your partnership over the last not only couple of years, but you've been deep in the trenches of higher education, and now to bring that to the partnership with K-12 is incredibly important to our entire body of work. And I know that there's a lot more work to do. We'll have a lot of discussion, but for that partnership, I really want to thank you. I know that you've enjoyed a great relationship with Superintendent Brown, and I think the state is better served because of it. So thanks again.
Commissioner Reed, I wanted to join my colleagues and thank you for your time and relationship you built with Superintendent Brown for the benefit of the students. Also, I want to take the time to, as you know, I'm really looking forward to get some feedback from your team with the interest we have expressed for internships for students to help us out with our need for tutors in the K-12 level. So looking forward to getting back to your team on that one.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Commissioner.
got a number of folks here that do not wish to speak. I'd like to recognize those folks. Mr. Barry Irwin, already supports the recommendation. Ms. Tanisha Ellis does not wish to speak. She also supports the recommendation. Mr. Michael Falk does not wish to speak. He also supports the recommendation. And Mr. Tom Weiler does not wish to speak, but he also supports the recommendation. Those wishing to speak, if you would come to the table, Mr. Gordon Ford, and I'll give this Ms. Bridgette Neal.
Thank you. Gordon Ford, Executive Director of Lincoln Preparatory School. I come before you to support the policy as written. However, I have some concerns concerning equity that need to be addressed in this policy and future policies. According to disaggregated data released by the department on August 5th, there is still a wide racial disparity in the earning of post-secondary credentials. According to the data, white students in Louisiana earn credentials at a rate of 63.1%, while black students earn credentials at a rate of only 38.8%. In the area where I live, it's even worse. What I found in the 7 parish area in my area is that every local traditional school district has a greater percentage of white students earning credentials than black students. All but one district has a black-white gap exceeding the state average. Every traditional district has at least half of their white students earning credentials. Not one traditional district has half of their black students earning credentials. Why disparities even exist between students within the same districts? The current and proposed policies allow schools in my area to have an A for strength of diploma while providing these opportunities to less than 30% of their black students. That does not sound like A performance to me. Ms. Hunter-Reid just said that graduation is the floor, not the ceiling. But we award 100 points A for just graduating students. And so these schools have an A in strength of diploma while failing to serve black students. Amazingly, most of these schools have early release policies for seniors. Schools receive full state and federal funding, but send these kids home at lunchtime, having not prepared them for college or for work. These students are cheated out of more than 18,000 instructional minutes per year, and they graduate with no credential. But their schools receive an A for strength of diploma. Again, I support the policy as written because it's better than what we have. But we got to do a much better job with equity in our policies.
Next I've got Mr. Ralph Bender and Dr. Janet Pelican.
Good afternoon, I'm Ralph Bender. I have the honor of being before you today as the Chairman of the Board of the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. Mahatma Gandhi said we must be the change we want the world to see. In this vein, it is without regard that BRAC supports the proposal to strengthen the diploma. We respect the diligent work of districts to ensure students receive opportunities to earn a credential or an associate degree while in school. Additionally, districts should receive increased accountability points for offering dual enrollment, fast forward, and jump start programs. Baton Rouge and the whole state is challenged by a talent shortage. You saw our local media this week, you saw there's a story that statewide we are short 6,000 nurses. Chancellor Willie Smith is opening a new school in the next, hopes to break ground in 2022 that will have 1,500 nursing students. Think about a student that can go through high school and have an associate degree and go to work right out of high school. You have the power to resolve this today in a significant way by acting to improve the strength of the diploma policy. The Capital Region education leaders are working hard on Fast Forward to get more workforce tools and college courses to our high schools. This policy will align school points with college and career. These programs will also provide an excellent benefit for all involved, students, the state, and the district. Students can decrease their student loans and increase their opportunity for livable wage upon graduation. On a personal note, I had the honor to serve on the Proprietary School Advisory Commission for, I think, 17 years. I had the opportunity to see countless schools come into our state to lure students for welding classes, for automotive classes, and other professional, non-college degree programs where the students spend $25,000 and $30,000 and $35,000 a year and were then out of the state. We have within our ability the opportunity to provide vast more numbers of students these same opportunities, graduate without loans. I know, as you've said today, that this takes a lot of time. I remind you of the Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Pope?
Janet Pope, representing Louisiana School Boards Association. The LSBA speaks out today on this agenda item in support of this proposed policy. It's good policy. Thank you to Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid, the Commissioner, the Dual Enrollment Task Force, the great work that the department has done with Jumpstart and Fast Forward, which brings us to this policy. Our association has found that the distribution of points proposed in this policy is more equitable than the previous calculation. We agree with Mr. Gordon. There's still work that we need to do in achieving equity among our student groups. We also want to extend our thanks to the LDOE for including what we call that gap filler to cover the transition period from the previous formula to the newly proposed formula. The LSBA has frequently advocated for including a transition period for this proposal. The transition period is necessary to ensure that both early adopters of the Fast Forward initiative are rewarded and those schools that need a full cohort duration to get implementation off the ground are not penalized. In practical terms, the 2023 cohort of students are entering grade 11 this year for August 2021. Their cohort is halfway complete. Without this transition policy, their respective schools and districts will be measured by outcomes they did not have the full duration of the cohort to try and to obtain. The transition policy also benefits incoming 9th graders and 10th graders. And since they will likely have not yet had the opportunity to align their schedules to be conducive to fulfilling of taking the advantage of these new opportunities, districts and schools being offered the time to consider how to align their school calendars, their schedules, to create an environment for students to take advantage of these opportunities was a welcome addition to this proposed policy. We thank the department for incorporating this feedback into the proposal, and we urge BESE to support this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pope. Comments from the board? Ms. Roche?
In the light of the overwhelming support that I'm hearing from the business community and from the educators, I'd like to offer a substitute motion to approve the recommendation as a notice of intent, calculating the constructive component index, and recommend the department to make the necessary revisions to the plan as a result of the proposed.
Second. Got a second. Opposed? Mr. Garvey?
Yes, I'd like to amend that motion to send this issue to the work group committee that we created under item 3.3.
I can accept that amendment.
Yeah, Mr. Garvey, I'm advised that we haven't completed that group yet, so that's not a possibility right now.
Okay, give me 1 second. I would like to amend that motion to send it to a work committee that will be formed by the BESE president to address accountability issues.
Do I have a second to that motion?
You will have to accept the amendment, or is that just a separate substitute motion?
No, that's, wait, we have, okay, so the motion on the floor was to defer. There's a substitute. We have to vote on the substitute before, and then it goes back to, if it fails, then it goes back to the original motion on the floor, and then.
Not if it's amended before we vote on it.
You don't have to accept your amendment, you know, substitute motion, if not, you didn't accept it yourself.
She did not accept it.
I don't think the Robert's Rules of Order require her to approve the proposed amendment.
Wait, okay, so hold on. So we have to approve this notice of intent, and you would like to amend the approved notice. Amend means you're going to tack on to it, so it's going to be approved and referred?
No, I'd like to amend the motion to send this issue to the work group, a work group to be formed by the BESE president.
So the amendment keeps her motion and adds something to it, a substitute would do.
I'd like to amend her motion to strike all the words in it and add that the
That's a
issue.
substitute. That's a substitute, and so we have to finish this substitute before we can take up the second substitute.
I don't know what Robert's rules are exactly on this, but if I have to accept the amendment, I do not accept the amendment.
No, that's not an amendment. That's
I would like to amend the motion to delay the notice of intent
That's not,
until we hear back from a work committee.
that's a substitute.
To delay is a substitute?
We're gonna have to do a roll call vote if there are any objections to Ms. Bochet's motion.
Does the chair accept that interpretation of Robert's Rules of
Yes,
Order?
sir. Yes, sir. My understanding is that you, basically, you do not agree with Superintendent Bochet's motion, and instead you would have an alternative proposal. So if that's correct.
And delaying it would be
Yes, sir.
disagreeing with it?
Yes. You're changing the motion.
I think her motion is that it passes through immediately, right? And your motion is something different than that.
And then it goes back to your motion to defer, which you can amend to delay.
That's the
If it
chair's
goes back
ruling.
to you.
I'll go with it.
So we have a substitute motion on the floor to approve this notice of intent. Yes, and amend the essence plan. So discussion on that, is there further discussion? We're on yours right now.
So board members, what I understand is we need to discuss Superintendent Bochet's motion that has been seconded.
Or we can just move to.
Or we can move to the objection and a vote. So first of all, is there any comment, additional comment from the board that is already been provided? Hearing none, is there any exception to Superintendent Bochet's motion?
Yes.
Roll call vote.
The motion is to approve its NOI and make adjustments to the ESSA plan. So you're voting on to do that, if you would like to approve it as NOI. Dr. Roby? None. Mr. Castile?
Yes.
Dr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
No.
Mr. Garvey?
No.
Ms. Holloway?
No.
Mr. Mellering?
No.
Ms. Orange Jones?
No.
Mr. Rock?
Yes.
Ms. Bochet?
Yes.
Mr. Morris, would you like to vote? The vote is
I vote yes.
5-4, sorry. Yeah.
It's time. Motion.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back to the motion to defer by Mr. Garvey, seconded by Mr. Miller. Would you like to amend? Would you like to amend?
I'd like to amend it.
Yes,
Your original
Superintendent, the original did not pass, so you have an opportunity to come up with an alternative
Well,
motion.
so
No, that's all to the original motion, it's just to the vote. It's left open.
that's the motion on the floor.
So Mr. Lawson, for clarity, could you state Mr. Garvey's motion to the board, please?
So it's back to the motion to defer until October. Until October.
I'm sorry, the motion is to defer until October.
Do I have a second?
It's already seconded.
Is there any further?
Okay. Further discussion on the amendment? Proposed.
There's no amendment.
No amendment is deferred.
Okay, so it's a standalone motion, right, that has been seconded, and the motion is to defer this item until October. Is there any discussion on that motion? If hearing none,
At
is there
this
any?
point, we can take some, if they object, we'll take objection.
Didn't hear any, is there any objection to the motion? No objection, so we need a roll call vote.
No, we're just taking objection. David?
Dr. David?
Castillo?
You got this?
O'Shea, and Mr. Rock?
Mr. Ron.
It's four.
All right, I got it. Okay.
I don't know.
It's done. It's done.
Yes.
It's deferred. Because we already did a roll call.
On a different one.
We already did it. If we do it again, it just keep going back and forth.
No, if it's five documents, it would fail, motion to defer.
I'm sorry. What?
Yes.
What would y'all like to do?
You need to vote on his motion.
To defer? Okay. Hold on one second.
My substitute motion failed. This is now on the table, so we have to vote on this.
Okay, so we're going to vote on the motion to defer. Dr. Boshi is not in attendance. Mr. Castile?
No.
Dr. Davis? No. Ms. Ellis? Yes. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Ms. Holloway?
Yes.
Mr. Mellering?
Yes.
Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Rock?
No.
Ms. Boucher?
No.
Mr. Morris?
No.
Would you like to vote?
I would like to vote no.
You vote no. All right, so it is 5-5.
So,
Would you like to be recorded as objective? Mr. Castillo, Dr. Davis, do y'all want to be, or just, it's fine? The roll call is fine?
Well, I voted against the motion.
Okay, all right, so it is divergence, right?
so need a motion. It's
Yeah.
a tie, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you.
We need to say.
So, like for clarification, on the tie vote, with regard to,
The vote is a tie, so there is no motion.
So the motion doesn't.
Does not pass.
So where does that leave us with status of this item?
So there are two options right here. We can move on and it would be recorded that the board took no action on this item. Or someone can offer another item, another motion, and we go from there.
Well, I'm sorry, what's that?
Give us all a call, where have you been? Ms. Davis, we're in a situation where we've got a deadlock. We do not have 11 members present, so the vote is 5-5. And so we've heard both sides of the argument, and we split it both ways. So now the question is for protocol going forward.
We can reflect that no action was taken by the board, or like 6 votes. So you said 5-5?
Yes.
Or, and then it could be pulled, or it could be pulled tomorrow when the 11th member is present. Is there?
Dr. is not present.
Oh, then we could pull it and vote tomorrow. If we want to move forward.
Options are good, right?
Or someone can make another motion.
Or do you want to defer it till tomorrow? Or is it, what was the motion?
There was one motion to accept an item as stated. That motion did not go through, it was 5-5. Then there was another motion to defer that item to October. The vote on that one was 5-5.
You can make a motion to defer it until tomorrow. That way we can automatically pull it and decide what the.
Thank you for that suggestion. Members, is there any interest to sleep on this one? Come back tomorrow and vote again on this item? If so, can I get a motion to do that?
I don't know that it's necessary. I think if we wanted to take it up again tomorrow, we could.
You can still do that. You can pull it as, it will be pulled as a because the board took them up.
We don't want to do it if we want to.
Would we need to add it to the agenda or?
No, it's a no, we have.
Pull it.
We'll pull it as a reason.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your help on that, Ms. Davis. Okay, let's move forward. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 21, item 3.3, consideration of an update report regarding the progress index for student growth. The department recommendation is to approve the establishment of a work group to review the K-8 student growth accountability measure as outlined. Backup documentation has been distributed.
Can we motion? Mr. Collins? Second. Second. Mr. Gordon? Opposed?
No presentation.
Thank you. Superintendent Brown, involved in your report.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Again, I go back to, you know, the rationale of how we ended up where we are. The Accountability Commission made a recommendation for the growth rate to move from 25% to 47%. We heard that strong signal. We know that growth is very important to a number of members of the board, and we believe it's really important as well. We believe growth holds a lot of opportunity to move our kids and our state forward. And so we brought that into consideration at 36%, which was the national average as a place to start that conversation. That was understandably deferred. And so my recommendation has shifted on this over time just because I want to try and help the board and help our state get to a better position in this. I entered the conversation around growth under the assumption that we had a sound and solid methodology for how we were calculating growth. Over time, I believe I learned that is not in fact the case, and our growth methodology has some complications that we need to look at and work through, and just make a decision if we feel comfortable with that methodology. And so as a result of that, my recommendation has shifted to ask that I be able to work with Board President Holloway and for her to appoint a subcommittee work group of the board, a working group of the board that would be responsible in many ways for working alongside the department, working with some national experts to explore this particular part of the formula. And so we have a timeline that's presented to you beginning September 5th by the time the board president would identify the work group members, and then findings and recommendations being presented to the full board on June 30th. That's actually 2022.
members' comments at this point? We have public comment? First one I have is Mr. Michael Falk. Does not wish to speak. He supports the recommendation. And Ms. Bridgette Neal, I believe earlier she said that she's okay at this point. Thank you. That's all the public comment that we have. Members, any additional comments? Hearing none. Got a motion on the floor.
Could I ask a question?
Ms. Boucher.
So this committee is going to look at the growth component, correct?
That is as it is stated currently, yes. Any other questions? Okay, we've got a motion on the floor. Is there any exception to this motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 22, item 4.1, consideration of a report regarding Louisiana statutes regarding compulsory attendance and truancy. The department recommendation is to receive.
Mr. Morris, we have had conversations over the last few months about how our systems across the state are tracking attendance, tracking truancy, looking at opportunities to improve in this particular area. I think we would all agree that if we don't have our students there in front of us, it becomes a challenge to educate our students. Oh, sorry.
Got a motion, Dr. Davis, and a second. Second. Appreciate it. Thank you. Opposed to the motion?
No.
And so we have invested considerable energy and resource thinking about re-engagement of families. We know that last year was particularly harmful in terms of the number of families that because of the pandemic weren't as engaged with the school system that we would like them to be, and rightfully so in many instances. September, I believe, is National Superintendents Month, and so it's a good time to be thinking about, how are we engaging families? And I wish that we were, completely out of this pandemic like all of us do. And so it is, continuing to be a nuanced conversation around attendance and engagement right now as we have the pandemic. But I do think it's important that Council, Joan Hunt and Mr. Bradford, for his college readiness, give some information here, and also acknowledging that there hasn't really been anyone at the agency that's coordinated attendance and truancy and engagement over the last roughly 10 years. And so we have put in place an individual who is now going to be responsible for doing that work and working alongside school systems around the state to try to help them support their families to engage in the system every day. So, Mr. Morris, I just asked Mr. Bradford to make a report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Ken Bradford, Assistant Superintendent for the Office of College and Career Readiness. Just to give a little bit of additional context to Superintendent Brumley. When we looked at the attendance numbers initially from COVID, what we saw was that from the February 1 count all the way up through last October's count, the numbers were down 16,700 students, the number of students. As we went into the spring semester, starting in January and February, with the governor's funding as part of their Recovery Act funding, one of the things that we discussed doing was bringing back to the department a role that had been eliminated through a reduction in force. And so we put an advertisement out. We have now hired a full-time staff member that will serve in that role as child welfare and attendance liaison. The other thing that we've done with our funding is also we have contracted with LSU, and I'm going to talk to them here about them and their role with us in a couple of slides to help locate those students, but also to help us work with our child welfare and attendance officers in our school systems on best practices around attendance and what we can do to re-engage students, both those that are truant or chronically absent, or those that may have not returned after COVID. But I do want to start today with just the definition of what truancy is. And you'll see it's here. Truancy in our state is actually defined in statute, and according to statute, it's revised statute 17-233. It's defined as when any student has either 5 unexcused days where they were tardy at school, or 5 unexcused days where they were absent at school in a given semester. And so when I talked with Mr. Morris about this, we're talking about what is the national average for truancy. When we have to report to the feds, the US DOE, around truancy, the way it is we have to report our truancy numbers. However, the states determine the definition for truancy. So when you look at the definition, for example, in our state, we do it by semester. And if a student has those 5 unexcused tardies or 5 unexcused absences within a semester, they're deemed truant, and they're counted as they had truancy that year. And we report that as part of the number. However, when you look at a state like Alabama, for example, they define truancy different in Alabama. In Alabama, it is 7 unexcused days of school in a semester. When you look at Mississippi, theirs is 5 unexcused days for the academic year, the whole academic year. So it's hard to compare truancy numbers across states. One area that we can look at, and it's really the definition of chronic absenteeism. And that's another number that we report to the U.S. Department of Education. And the Office of Civil Rights within the U.S. Department of Education clarifies that that is when a student has 15 absences or more in a year. And that's any type of absence. That's if you're unexcused or if you're excused. That's chronic absenteeism. So when we look at our truancy data numbers, the state average from the most recent set of data, 2020, is 28.19% of our students have been reported to the department in our data collection systems as being truant. And that means that 28% of our students have either had accumulated in a semester in 2019 in the fall, or in the spring semester, they have accumulated 5 unexcused tardies or 5 unexcused absences. And there's no mix. 2 unexcused tardies and 3 absences does not mean you truant. You have to have 5 of one or 5 of the other in a semester. So that's what the state average is. If we now then talk about chronic absenteeism, to give you a sense of where we are nationally, our numbers here at the department, we just pulled these, they're 19%. We have a 19% chronic absenteeism rate. That means that 19% of our students have a recorded absence during the academic year. That's either unexcused or excused. Chronic absenteeism, 19%. The national average is 16%. So we are above the national average on the total number of absences that a student has in a year. I think what I'll do now is before I move to the next and talk about the next slide about what are we doing about this, I'll just pause and see, since we have our counsel, Ms. Joan Hunt, here, to see if you have any clarifying questions about how truancy is defined in the law, how it's reported to the department, or if I need further clarification on chronic absenteeism.
Right, Mississippi, the conversation today. It's number 7, Mississippi. What's the average in Mississippi for truancy?
I don't have that number. So the number 7 was from Alabama, and that's how many truants is in a semester in Alabama. In Mississippi, they do it 5 for the total year. I don't have, based on their definition, what their truancy numbers. I don't have. So we can research that.
You know, Alabama then as well, right?
I'm sorry?
The truancy rate for Alabama, given their number 7.
I don't have the truancy rates for that. The only number that I pulled specific for this meeting was I was looking at the chronic absenteeism, because that's the number that's consistent across all states, because we all use the same definition for chronic absenteeism, which is 15 total absences out of the school year. So that was the number that I pulled, but we'll be happy to research and see what other states are relative to chronic absenteeism, especially here in the southern area. But we're at 19%, national average was 16. Okay, so what are we doing? I think there's really there's three things that we're doing as we're trying to move forward. And the first is we have partnered with the LSU Social Research and Evaluation Center. Dr. Rhodes is here today from LSU to speak briefly about the work that she has done thus far on engaging with school systems and the strategies that they're going to work with our school systems on to re-engage these students around coming back to school and best attendance practices. So we have our LSU partnership. Again, I have 3 bullets here: assisting school systems with truant students who have not been attending school in 2020, 2021. Re-enrolling eligible students that may have not been in school last year due to COVID, helping locate some of those 17,000 students that were not on the rolls last year, and promoting good attendance practices with school systems. And so they're working on that with us. And the second thing is what we're doing, again, we've alluded to this 2 times today, that is hiring, again, having a dedicated position here at the department, a child welfare and attendance liaison. It's a position that has been vacant for 8 years. We lost that through a reduction in force. We've now reinstated that position. And we introduced that lady yesterday at the board retreat. That is Ms. Shanika Adams. So at this time, I think what I'll do is I'll ask Dr. Rhodes if you'll come up to the table also and share what you're doing, work with the school systems, and then see if our board members have questions about the current status of what you're seeing.
Surely. Good afternoon. My name is Edith Rhodes. I'm the director and professor of research at my LSU Social Research and Evaluation Center.
Excuse me, can you share the microphone and pull it closer to you, please?
Again, I'm Judith Rhodes. I am the director and professor of research at the Social Research and Evaluation Center at the LSU College of Human Sciences and Education. And as Mr. Bradford mentioned, we are working together with the department on an initiative called the Attendance Alliance, where we are working with school districts and also community partners to assist the districts in locating and re-engaging students that have not been attending school during the pandemic. So that's one area that we're working together with school districts. We are also creating an attendance alliance, which is a statewide, comprehensive, cross-sector partnership that's really based on, when you think about a school, family, community partnership, because attendance is one thing I think everybody in this room would agree is a good thing, that everyone knows that kids need to be in school to learn. If they're not in school, they're not learning. And as Mr. Bradford said, when you're counting truancy, when you're counting for 5 incidents per semester, a child could be missing 4 days, and never even get on that truancy radar. So when you think about chronic absenteeism, that really is a better, in my opinion, measure to gauge how kids are attending school. So we are working with, we have 12 community agencies that we're working with around the state. They're working together with their school districts, with the child welfare and attendance staff. We are also working with other organizations that are family, working with families to have kids be successful in school. We're doing training for the attendance specialist to be working with child welfare and attendance. So that is the basis that we are, raising the importance of attendance to elevate and amplify how important it is for kids to be attending school.
Thank you for that. Can you talk me through the process, whether we're talking about truancy or chronic absenteeism, given that this hasn't been addressed in nearly 10 years, and based on the way we define truancy, it's been as bad as 48% 2017, 2018. And this is a new program that's being put in place to address that tragic statistic. Can you help me understand what's going to trigger action for truancy and what's going to trigger action or chronic absenteeism. And then can you take me through the steps? If I'm identified as a truant student, then what's going to happen once that trigger's full? Who am I going to be talking to? What are they going to be responsible for? And what's the next step after that so that we get this student back in the classroom again?
In Louisiana, truancy really is going to be dealt with in
Could
chronic
you please move a little closer to the microphone?
Truancy and chronic absenteeism really is dealt with on a parent and school district by school district basis. There is no uniform way to address this across the state. There are different interventions that are being used. Some parishes work in conjunction with the task centers, which are the truancy assessment and service centers. BESE may be involved. Child welfare and attendance in some parishes deal with that solely by themselves. But what we always recommend is truancy really needs to be addressed early. So waiting until there's 10, 15, 20 absences really is too late, because the problem is not truancy. Truancy really is a symptom of other problems. It is an excellent indicator that something is going on with that child. It may be school related, it may be family related, it may be community related. So it is an excellent indicator for children to be identified, but the key is to be identified early and not to wait till those problems escalate. So we have worked in the past with a truancy intervention program where children were identified early as like the 5th unexcused absence, and then an assessment can be put in place to see if this is a chronic problem that needs to be addressed. And then that family really needs the child, and that family really needs to be addressed one-on-one to see what is causing the school absences. And then
I'm not really hearing anything though with regard to some sort of standardized process.
there is no standardized process.
Okay. So going forward, what's going to be different? This is a tragic statistic in my mind. So going forward, I'm trying to understand, Superintendent Brown shared that he's going to have a new staff member that's going to be assigned to this. So I'm trying to understand what's going to be different and how can this board have confidence that we're going to see some enormous changes in the statistics and get kids back in the classroom. We take advantage of these new programs that are being rolled out, and $4 billion in federal funds that are here to help those kids out.
What we are really working is to work together with the districts to build capacity to change the way that school attendance is viewed. So what we would ideally like to see, and we're working toward, in the same way you have multi-tiered systems of support for academic and behavioral interventions, you can put into place, into schools, universal approaches to promote attendance, and then kids that are identified with some problems, then you give them more targeted intervention. Some children will require more intensive intervention. So that is one structural change or structural piece that we would like to promote and to build across the school districts. So it's really really building the capacity of being more proactive and also promoting school engagement, because we know that the way that students will most likely attend school is when they are engaged in school, when they want to go to school, when schools are relevant, there's positive regard for that child and that family. So we're working essentially reframing attendance and thinking about mindsets of schools and people that are working with children.
At what point, just one question, Mr. Director, at what point does, going forward, at what point does a parent get involved, and at what point does a judge get involved?
Ideally, the parents are involved at the beginning.
School engagement includes family engagement. That includes the family being attached to the school, the child being attached to the school. You mentioned law enforcement. Truancy is a legal term, and there are, within the children's code, steps that can be taken through juvenile justice means. So it's a stick in the carrots. Sometimes the judicial system does get involved, but that should be the last chance. It shouldn't be the first thing to be put into place, but there is a place for that in post-solution.
I would just add also, Mr. Morris, that as part of the incentive funding that you've heard Dr. Bromley speak to and share, we will also be funding for school systems, early warning systems, dropout early warning systems. You'll hear those referred to as DEWs, and what those are systems whereby it looks at data points of students and it provides that flag to the counselor, to the child welfare and attendance officer saying, hey, you have a student here that is trending towards being truant, and it will provide that flag for the school. So you will see coming forward in a set of allocations with our incentive funding that will allow for school systems to request funding to implement an early warning system. So for those school systems that have those high truancy rates, those high chronic absenteeism rates, they will be able to work with a specific partner who will come in, and then they will have a dropout early warning system available to them in their school, which will do the things that you're talking about, which is trigger whenever a student reaches certain thresholds in there of truancy and chronic absenteeism, and provide those interventions, which come at the various levels of interventions that we will give.
I'd just like to say that truancy in many respects is a lot like our literacy levels as well as our standardized test assessments. They reflect a lot more than what is going on inside our schools, in their classrooms and their teachers. It reflects the families that they're growing up in, the food they have on their table, their access to behavioral and mental health and physical health. And so to me, when we look at truancy, this is not going to be a problem where we can just flip a switch and fix this. And so what I would like to say is that this evaluation center, Dr. Rhodes, they are located inside the School of Social Work at LSU. And so they are very well equipped to go into districts across the state and help them identify the comprehensive resources that can be brought to bear on these families to help support them as they navigate their truancy and trying to bring that child back to the place where he is in school or she is in school on a consistent basis. And I will say, having had the opportunity to work with Dr. Rhodes on other projects, I'm well aware of previous work that they have done in districts that were showing remarkable results, but were cut because of budget constraints, particularly in East Baton Rouge Parish is a good example. So their program and their approach to truancy, you can look at previous evaluations of their work and see that they do make a difference, and I'm super excited to see you guys back with us. Thank you, Dr. Rhodes.
And I would say, Mr. Morris, we started for 8 to 10 years. There's been really not a whole lot done. You'd see a report that got posted on the website saying the truancy rates are this percent, and then that was pretty much the end. And what we have done now since June is somebody here at the department, we have picked up the phone. We have called those school systems. We have said, hey, we noticed your truancy rates. Are you aware that LSU is providing this service to you to come in and help give you the supports that you need? And we have, what is the number of school systems now? It's almost over a third of our school systems have engaged, over 20 school systems have engaged and said, yes, we would like to receive that support from LSU, and LSU is working with them to start addressing these and providing those interventions. And again, we're going to be coming back with funding allocations for school systems to also supplement that work and provide them the training and the early warning systems to identify students.
Thank you, sir. Members, other comments? Mr. Bradford, having really good discussions with Dr. Kimmel and her team about developing key performance indicators, and I think that's going to be addressed later today. I'd like to know, can I get a commitment from you and your team that you guys develop a KPI on this so that you come back to the board at appropriate frequency to give us an update. I'm particularly interested in what your target is going forward, whether it be for truancy or comprehensive absenteeism, so we get some sense of, you know, what's reasonable here, get it back in the ballpark, and then, you know, we certainly like to get comfortable that we're getting those students back in the classroom, and to Dr. Davis' point, we realize this isn't for the switch. You know, there's a lot of external variables here in play, so there's a huge issue that we need to get it under control, so you can make that commitment from.
Yes, sir.
So thank you so much. Thank you. We have one room part of this one. Mr. Michael Paul does not wish to speak. Information only. Any further discussion, members? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. Next item.
The next item is on page 26, item 5.1, consideration of the approval of course offerings for the Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts, beginning with the 2021-2022 school year. The department recommendation is to approve the new faculty course offerings and textbooks selected for LSMSA.
So moved. Thank you. In a second. Ms. Jones, thank you. Discussion before we get started, members. Objection to the motion. Okay. Dr. Brumley, do you folks have any comments on this one? Before I share my comments?
No, sir. This is an item that runs to the BESE office.
Okay. So maybe I'm directing my questions to Ms. Davis, or am I directing my questions to Ms. Davis? Okay. Yeah, so I'm looking for some help on this one, some background on Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts. So my understanding to date is that BESE does not select curriculum for K-12 schools in our state. BESE establishes standards. School districts have the autonomy to select their own curriculum and satisfy the standards. But apparently this school is an exception. And it is on BESE to approve the faculty, course offerings, the textbooks, and any changes in any of the three. Can you help me out a little bit with the background here, why this one is
This law just happens to be in statute. It happened, it was one of the first schools to separate into this schedule, through special school districts. They have their own budget. You know, now we have Thrive Academy and others. But when they did separate, one of the things that was included in the laws were their materials to be brought to BESE for approval annually, or any changes annually. So this is just a piece to be in compliance with that. We have discussed that textbooks, there was a change in the law. There's no longer requirement for textbooks to be approved by BESE or the process to be managed. So that is just something we left in there because it was historically the way we've done it. But that's the reason. It's statute.
Okay, so I'm assuming that the department doesn't have the staff to review curriculum and that those decisions because it's not their responsibility. Who's doing these reviews at BESE for this particular school?
The department does look at it, does take a look at it.
Okay, so my note here says that BESE staff recommends to approve all three. I'm just trying to get an understanding for who's done the review for this particular item, particularly the curriculum.
Mr. Creon, I don't know that he has reviewed this specifically this time, but we would normally, in the past, his office would forward that on to review. These two additions have been reviewed specifically this year, but.
So I just like to get some clarification. It says the BESE staff recommends it, so
Yes.
I'd like to know who on the BESE staff reviewed it, and they're providing the recommendation, and I want to understand the basis for their recommendation for the curriculum for this particular item.
I I just recommended approval of the changes, but usually, the department reviews it. If that didn't happen, we can definitely look into it. There were only a few things that changed. We're only approving the changes. What page is that on?
Page 26 in the handout.
I think it's curriculum, let me check. Yes, so all the, there's being approved are new faculty, new course offerings, and then new textbooks. So those are, and there's only a few new courses. They're new, the new textbooks are 3, and then the new teachers are 3. But we can definitely defer this and review these things if you would like, these new courses.
Superintendent Brown.
Mr. Morris, yeah, I was just going to acknowledge the fact that Dr. Steve Horton is here, who is the director of Louisiana School of Math, Science, and Arts, that in many ways operates with a level of autonomy, and as well has his own board that oversees OSMSA. I believe there's a BESE appointee, potentially Mr. Castile, that's a member of the board. And I'm not aware of a time when you've been before BESE before around these particular items. So welcome, Dr. Horton.
Thank you for having me. And I'll be glad to answer a question on how the coursework is improved. First, the courses that we're putting forward are elective courses, so we're not making any changes to the curriculum that meets the requirements for a Louisiana high school diploma. But the Louisiana school by statute was formed to offer a college-level curricular offering that was rich in the liberal arts and sciences for students who were looking for an advanced education, with the intention of sending them out from Louisiana to move on to more advanced programs that they couldn't get in their own school district. So when we create the curriculum, we are governed by our own board of directors, and Mr. Castile does sit on that board. But our program offerings come from the faculty up. We model a higher education curriculum or a college curriculum, and we enjoy the same elements of academic freedom as the colleges do. Coursework comes from the faculty. It moves into Director of Academic Services, which on the university side would be equivalent of Provost and Vice President. Before she sees it, the department head would review the curricular offering and offer recommendation for approval to the Provost. From there, it would come to me for approval. From me, it would go to the Board of Directors of the school for review and approval. And for these particular courses, the particular textbooks and the faculty, the Board of Directors of the school approved all of these actions in the June 21 meeting.
I appreciate the background on your work process. You guys still hold you for just a second, because I know you and I talked about this already, to get your comments. But I'd really like to go back to the work process of BESE. You know, if there's a recommendation before the board, that BESE's got a staff recommendation, then my expectation is that we can understand who that individual is, and then we can understand what the basis for their recommendation. So that's a concern for me. Then with regard to this particular item, Mr. Castillo and I had a discussion about this. We discussed my concern about the idea that the sensitive nature of this class, the CL, EN 375, the literature class, that's labeled gender studies, where literature is defined as a wide range of text, with work from the following authors. I understand Ernest Hemingway and Oscar Wilde, the other authors I've never heard of before. I Google those authors, and it just really raised a flag for me. Whether this is literature or something else, you know, so I wanted to better understand, you know, what's being presented to students. This is a one-off for the board. We're actually approving curriculum here. So before I personally approve some curriculum, I like to understand what that curriculum is, particularly on such a sensitive topic. And particularly after I Googled the 4 authors and got their bio in front of me. Then I had a concern too, because in the notes here it says that this is an elective course, but it could be combined with another elective course to satisfy a core credit. So I've never heard of that before, so I wanted to get some comments on that one. And then lastly, I went to the school's website And the course is already offered on the website. So I'm trying to get some clarification there. If the course is already being utilized by students, and this is a delayed request of BESE, or if the course has not actually started yet, what's the status of the course, given that it's already advertised on the website?
The course is an elective course, and when it says meet the core requirements for the school, that's the core requirements for the Louisiana School Diploma. Our students are required to take the equivalent of English 4, which we call Comp and Rhetoric 1 and 2. The course, like I said, coming from the faculty moving up, it is a sensitive nature course, but in most of your universities that offer honors level curricula, and I use, for example, LSU, McNeese, University of New Orleans, all of them are going to offer some level of a diversity course in gender studies. That's becoming more and more common, and that was a hole that we had in our program, that we didn't offer any kinds of coursework in gender studies in literature. So many of our students who leave us and move on to an honors program at a university in Louisiana or outside of Louisiana would be able to articulate credit for a course such as that into the university setting. The course readings that are proposed on this syllabus would just be an example of course of readings or text that the particular instructor for that semester may select to meet the expected learning outcomes for that course. Another instructor could teach that same course another semester and offer a different type of reading list depending on that person's expertise or that person's background. But really the basis of the course is to look at or appreciate. If you go back to the beginning, in the older days, I'd say in the last 10 years, it would have been a course in women's studies. Now it's basically, the terminology is changing, and it's taking a look more in a diverse approach to writers and their impact on society. Like I said, when you look at the names of the authors that are being presented, most of them is just the fact that they have an interesting, a diverse approach to writing, a different approach to the world. And again, it's an exploration course that students do not have to take. They can take it if they have an interest in it. But in most cases, students who elect a course in gender studies are looking forward to a higher education curriculum or program that's going to be probably in English, or it's going to be in gender studies, areas such as that. The course was approved, or our courses were approved by the board of directors in June, and then we typically come to the BESE board in September to get our list of courses approved for the year, our faculty approved for the year, and the textbooks approved for the year. So how we're doing this is generally protocol, and how we do this every year.
So is the course already in progress?
No, we haven't started school yet. We actually start classes tomorrow.
Okay. So you have the beginning of more approval day to offer this class tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then could you just help me with clarification on this course could be paired with another upper level English elective or service or English core credit? So if you're putting two electives together for English core credit, is that satisfying a Louisiana high school diploma requirement, or is that something in addition to that when you see core that's capitalized here?
The core requirement to meet the Louisiana high school diploma is going to be is English 4. The equivalent of our school would be Composition and Rhetoric 1, Composition and Rhetoric 2. For the Louisiana school diploma, and I just had some notes of different elective courses that we're offering this year to meet that second requirement for the Louisiana school diploma. An elective in folklore, an elective in Sylvia Plath, an elective in creative writing, science fiction writing, the works of Emily Dickinson, literature of modern Asia and Africa.
I'm just trying to understand if the core credit concept is something that you need to your school or satisfy the statewide requirement.
It's meet statewide. I guess my question, we meet statewide requirement for the high school diploma with Comp and Rhetoric 1 and 2. These are classes that we offer to meet the requirements for the Louisiana school diploma. When our students graduate, they receive 2 diplomas. The state high school diploma, which makes them eligible for TOPS, and then the Louisiana school diploma, which was created as part of the school's formation in 1982.
Right. So it's that second diploma this applies to, right? And so Dr. Brown, I just want to get clarification here on the concept. Is this something that is unique to the school or something that you use statewide? And if you have any different thoughts on it?
Yeah,
combining 2 electives to satisfy a core requirement.
would take some time to further explore that, Mr. Morris. In terms of the curriculum, you know, we're not here to make a value judgment, particularly on the courses that they're suggesting, because like Dr. Morris said, they have a board that oversees that. I'm not sure that it's ever been the case that a course or a teacher has been in question from Ellis in this state. I mean, certainly other members of the board would know better than I, who've been here for some time.
Mr. Castillo, can you shed some light for us?
Well, I want to first start by saying that the board did approve the items, and I also want to compliment Dr. Borgman and the staff. I will confess that what I shared with Mr. Morris is that we were so much more impressed, frankly, and I am, with the faculty that we were asked to improve. You look at Dr. Kira Brown, who has a PhD from Vanderbilt High School. Dr. Caleb Ford, PhD from UC Berkeley. And Dr. Islam, who's a math teacher, who has a master's in applied mathematics and scientific computation. That it is a stellar program that you're running, Dr. Morgan, and thank you for doing that. But I wanted to highlight for the board the impressive faculty that's there. It rivals the faculty of many colleges and universities, so I'm not sure that gets highlighted enough. And as it relates to the substance of the curriculum, I candidly defer to the leadership at the school and the very well qualified faculty that have selected these particular courses to enrich the lives of their students. And as far as it relates to the delicacies of the captain, I'll yield the floor and allow you to continue to explore that at your will. You noticed that slide, right?
That
Yeah,
second
that's where I got that. Thank you, Mr. Castillo.
That second diploma you referred, that's equivalent to a non-public school.
Correct.
Diploma.
This
So
class
that is
does not
why the
affect the high school diploma that
allowed.
Louisiana offers at all.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Does any other member of the board have any comment on this one? Dr. Davis?
I'd like to say that, you know, your school is modeled after a college experience, and as a professor at LSU, this gets to this idea that they have a separate set of core requirements and can electives count for them. As the undergrad advisor in my department, I routinely approve special topics classes that are electives that a professor is offering on that basis to meet one of our concentration or core requirements. This is just something that is done at the collegiate level when you have faculty who are experts in a particular area. And so it sounds like that you're doing, you know, a very good job mimicking the college experience in terms of allowing for specialized courses to move in.
We're proud of our students because when they leave Louisiana school, the majority of them leave us with about 65 to 70 hours of college credit that's offered by our faculty and transcribed through Northwestern State University, either through a dual enrollment program or the fact that our faculty are not high school certified, they're college certified. So we're very proud that our students normally walk into a college classroom as a junior. And courses like this, as an elective, it's coming from student interest. A lot of our special topics that we offer come from student interest, but when they leave us and go to a university, we're proud when they can say that they took that course from our faculty member and that university accepted that course from us and articulated 3 hours of college credit. So it allowed them not to have to take the required course at the university because they had it with us already.
Appreciate that. I just feel uncomfortable, you know, in a situation here where we're asked to approve curriculum and that's not standard practice and it's not from our position. Mr. Garvey, you got a comment?
Yeah, I would like to know if I can get a copy of the books that will be used this year, a list of the books that will be used this year, written material that will be read this year.
Submit a full list of just the changes.
You should have a list of the new textbooks and
The
since
new
it's a
ones,
new
yeah, I
course,
think
it
you
should
say
be
you
listed.
want all of them? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'd like a chance
Not just the
to
new ones.
Oh,
look
the
at
whole
that.
list of all of our books?
No, just the ones that will be used this year.
For that class, right? For
Oh,
that class,
yeah.
Mr. Garvey?
Just for that one class.
There that should be listed with the new textbooks.
I didn't see a list particular to this class. I saw a little cool math, a lot of math.
In a lot of cases, it may not be textbooks for the courses, those could be accessed using the internet.
Right,
This
but
particular
if I have a
reading
list,
from
I can
August.
access them through the internet.
There's only 3 books listed for new major textbooks.
Yeah, there's some really cool math and science books on there, but I didn't see anything on this topic.
The course may be based on readings as opposed to a textbook.
Readings would be excerpts,
Yes.
textbook, if I can get it.
Well, not a textbook, it could be excerpts from the web, it could be excerpts of faculty selections.
If I could get a list of those, I'd like to look at them before approving this. You'd started this tomorrow, so it's a little late for me to have time to look at it before approving it. So I'm gonna hold my vote on this until I have a chance to look at it.
Thank you. I feel the same way. I just feel really comfortable when I have to approve something I've never seen before. Dr. Davis, go ahead.
Well, I guess I just have a question about why we don't have that same level of due diligence to classical scholars, classical gymnasium. Like, I feel like we are targeting this class because it is pertaining to gender and looking at gender through a variety of lenses. And I guess I'm not sure why that needs an extra layer of scrutiny as opposed to other classes that are being proposed by this.
I'm comfortable asking for all material. I'm comfortable asking for a sample of all material. If I'm going to approve it, in addition to Mr. Garvey's request, I'm happy to, if you have a problem, I'm happy to expand on that and ask for copies of the other 2 classes that are proposed as well, just so as a board, we get some sense of what we're being asked to approve. I think that's a reasonable request.
Or we could have legislation changing so that BESE does not approve the curriculum.
That'd be fine with me
It's
too.
an unusual situation for this school because we don't usually approve curriculum.
In the legislation.
Not
In the legislation,
unless it's been changed.
Dr. Brown, am I not correct, you're exempt from?
I have the statute.
But I think what I heard was, if the legislation changed so that the curriculum approval would come to BESE, then it would be an issue here, we would get this kind of request. But since it's something that's not standard for us,
What are you talking about, what we're approving today?
In other words, the school's not a governance of this.
No, but the statute does say, y'all are saying curriculum, but it's courses, which is not necessarily the same as curriculum. But it does say new courses, new textbooks, and new packaging that the board brings.
you understand my position, Mr. Gardner, make sure it's the same position. It's still very uncomfortable being asked to approve something I've never seen before. And particularly when it's this scale, you know, to our high school and so forth.
Actually, it's a unique special topics course that would be similar to the other ones that we offer, that aligns with the mission of the school, offering a rich, broad, liberal arts education. to our
I understand
students.
the intent, I understand the intent, that's clear. It's just, to me, it's a concept. You know, it's unprecedented from my experience on the board, and I'm still getting comfortable with it, that's all. Any other comment before we proceed?
It is still pleasant why we have to approve the curriculum. Just a question.
This is in my time at school, this is the first time I've had to address this with BESE as well.
We do it every year.
But usually it's just new courses, new textbooks, and the faculty, that they go through a rigorous review from our board of directors before it comes to you all for approval.
Mr. Hart, you have a comment?
This has been coming to BESE for years. I worked at the Louisiana school for 12 years. I prepared the list of the new textbooks, because I was in charge of textbooks. The faculty was scrutinized from one end, and just about all of them have their PhDs. And then it's the same process. This is nothing new. This needs a board of approval and move on.
Thank you, Mr. Rock. Any other comment? Hearing none. Is there any objection to the motion? Mr. Rowley expressing an objection. Okay.
So just say, raise your hand if you object to the motion.
If you have concern about the motion, object to the motion, please raise your hand.
Okay, we have Mr. Garvey and then Mr. Morris. Would you like to be captured?
Yep.
Okay, so we don't need to roll call this.
Okay, fine.
It's
We don't
only
need a
there's
roll
a
call.
question of what the.
And Mr. Melvin would like to abstain.
If there's no further objection, then the motion passes. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming back. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having an interest in this school.
The next item is on page 39, item 7.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 137, Louisiana Early Learning Center licensing regulations regarding staff certification requirements and applicant processing fees. The department recommendation is to approve this declaration of emergency, revisions to Bulletin 137, Section 1723, effective August 18, 2021, for a period of 180 days or until adopted as final rule, and to approve this notice of intent.
Good motion. Ms. Holloway, second. Mr. Jones, thank you. Discussion on the board.
Mr. Morris, I just want to offer what we're actually doing here. I think it's important. Our child care industry has done an amazing job over the last year in a very difficult situation and continues to do a great job. And so what we are offering here to do is just to provide some additional support so that they can stay staffed. It's offering to, using some of our stimulus money that we have available, covering background checks for employees, which would just be an additional level of assistance for the time being. And also updating to comply with the federal mandate to make sure that all of the employees are certified in the first aid and CPR, which, you know, is just good practice.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any public comments?
Just one that does not wish to speak.
I've got a card here from Ms. Cindy Bishop. She does not wish to speak, but she supports the recommendation. Members, any additional comments? Any objection to the motion? No objection heard, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 41, item 7.2, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 139, Louisiana Child Care and Development Fund Programs regarding the Child Care Assistance Program. The department recommendation is to approve the notice of intent.
Can we get a motion? Jones, second. Ms. Ellis?
Again, Mr. Morris, just a set of actions that we believe will help this particular industry right now when they need us the most.
Do you have any public comments? We've got a number of folks that do not wish to speak. We've got Ms. Rita Curtin. She supports the recommendation. Ms. Jelena Morris. She does not wish to speak, but she supports the recommendation. Sherelle Williams does not wish to speak, but supports the recommendation. Anita Kendall does not wish to speak, but supports the recommendation. Ms. Christy Gibbons does not wish to speak, but supports the recommendation. Ms. Kim Sentmore Washington does not wish to speak, but supports the recommendation. Ms. Cindy Bishop does not wish to speak, but also supports the recommendation. Got three folks that would like to speak. Ms. Rochelle Wilcox and Dr. Lee Sonia.
Hello, my name is Rochelle Wilcox, and I am the Executive Director of Wilcox Academy of Early Learning. We have three. Can you push the button? Hello.
There you go, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry. Hello, my name is Rochelle Wilcox. I am the Executive Director of Wilcox Academy of Early Learning. We have three locations in the greater New Orleans area. If we're going to do, if we want to get different results, we have to do something different, which is to pay based on enrollment instead of attendance for the child care assistants. We must match our funds to what should be our priority, early learning education. Should be one of our priorities. The data shows for every dollar that we invest in early care and education, we get $13 of return. And with that being said, early childhood education is one of the most heavily regulated industries. However, we're often underfunded. To be clear, CCAP is still highly underfunded. However, when the pandemic hit, this emergency order was put in place, it was one of the things that sustained me, that kept me at my doors open and allowed me to still pay staff. So today, we are asking that you that you support this recommendation and continue to think based on enrollment. The early care education field needs it. We require it, and we thank you for your vote.
Thank you, ma'am. Sonia?
Libby Sonia, the Executive Director of the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. I want to echo everything that Ms. Wilcox just said, and also state that the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children supports this policy regarding paying on enrollment. This policy will help support the business of child care and support the early care and education of Louisiana's youngest learners. It also mirrors the funding mechanism of the K-12 system to have a seamless enrollment vision for the student population and how we pay for them, allowing child care to offer stability to their business, but also to the families that they serve. Thank you.
We've also got a card from Ms. Pelican, but she hasn't indicated that she'd like to speak or not. Thank you. Dr. Brown, any additional comment?
No, I think that we have a collection of individuals who operate child care centers over here, and I just want to say thank you. I mean, thank you so much. I mean, it's a hard year, and you're there, and sometimes you don't have all the staff you need, and you're figuring it out, you know. Just God bless you. Thank you.
Echo those comments. Thank you, guys. Any additional comments from the board? Mr. Miller.
I just want to say thank you to Dr. Chason. I know her and I have talked about this issue recently. Thank you to her and her staff for all this support. This is definitely something that is going to provide a lot of assistance, not just to the families, but to the state as a whole. So thank you for everything.
Thank you, sir. Members, any other comments? Hearing none, you've got a motion on the floor. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 47, item 7.4, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 118, statewide assessment standards and practices regarding Leap Connect scale score ranges. The department's recommendation is to approve this declaration of emergency effective August 18, 2021, for a period of 180 days or until adoption is final rule, and to approve as notice of intent.
Thank you. Can I get a motion? 30 days and a second. Storm County. Dr. Brown, any comments? That's right. Ms. Davis?
I would like to say that at some point I would like to hear from the department about this process of determining scale, the scale ranges for Lead Connect, because I was on this committee that chose these ranges, and I have to say that it appears to me that it was pretty unscientific, and I don't have a clear understanding of what happened in the process before it got to this committee, because we essentially were shown the acceptable range in the previous year, and we were given multiple options to choose from for the current year. And so I have just some concerns about where's the science behind how we ought to, or where we think our kids with exceptionalities ought to be scoring on Lead Connect. And then also I have concerns about, we have a wide range of abilities inside Lead Connect, and we're treating all of them as if they're capable of the same range of work. And I don't think that that's true. And so I would just appreciate a better understanding of how exactly we got to this point and before it got to the committee where we're just given choices.
Mr. Morse, Jennifer Baird, in our assessments, accountability, and analytics team, Dr. Jennifer Baird is available for questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. You met originally to kind of set parameters for the percentage of kids you'd like to follow in ranges. The standard setting committee actually looks at every single item, and the very first thing they do is identify a level of difficulty for those items. And so we use a wide range of teachers that do this. They're educators. They're really they're well versed in their areas, and they provide us with these values for what they determine as difficult. Then we have to we rank those, and we have to make a cut so that the student distribution that you all recommended will fall within those scales for ranges. So we do they set values for the difficulty level. They're not always linear, as you know. They're not necessarily linear in one subject, and they're certainly not necessarily linear across all grade levels. The difference between one item and the next is not necessarily exactly the same as you go up. And so all those things we have to take into consideration as we make the ranges so that we have a consistent distribution of students across the 4 ranges.
But so I guess my question is, why does the distribution of students across the ranges need to be consistent? Is that based in some science about how students with disabilities are in the environment, in our school systems? I guess that this is a really, really complicated, probably, discussion to have. And so maybe what I would appreciate is that if we could invite your office to come to a SEEP meeting and explain to us kind of the science behind it, and then that way that will better allow me to get a good understanding of what we're doing and the science behind it, and then we can see maybe if there's some kind of revision that we might want to talk about with BESE.
And we do produce a technical report that we make public every single year for all of our assessments that get very into the weeds on all of the science. So certainly we want to be able to share that with you as well.
Great, thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. Any additional discussion, members? None, is there any objection? So I did have one public comment card from Mr. Michael Paul, who is not wishing to speak. He supports the recommendation. Thank you, sir. Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 51, item 7.5, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, Louisiana School District and State Accountability System regarding the ACT WorkCase Assessment Index. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent and to authorize the department to make necessary revisions as outlined in Louisiana as a state plan.
Hear a motion. Dr. Davis, a second. Can I get a second for the motion? Mr. Castillo, thank you, sir. Dr. Brown, have any discussion? Mr. Garvey?
Yeah, I'd like to offer a substitute motion to defer on this item until October.
I'd like to second that substitute motion.
Got a second to that motion?
For the sake of everyone in the audience, I would like to support Mr. Garvey's substitute motion on this particular item.
So we got a consensus on this one? All right, we got some public interest. The initial expressions and public interest on this one, several folks wishing to speak, and call your name, given the motions that are on the floor right now. If you still wish to speak, please feel free to come forward, but you understand the motion on the floor right now. So Mr. Tommy Byler does not wish to speak, but he supports the recommendation. Dr. Wendy Bodine? Mr. Michael Paul. Dr. Ken Portland. Mr. Bridgette Neal. And Mr. Gordon Ford.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just want to point out that although many states have a definition for college and career readiness, Louisiana is one of the states that does not have a definition of college and career readiness. Our estimate states in part, as part of its high school success indicators, Louisiana measures the college and career readiness of all students by requiring access to the ACT for all juniors in Louisiana. This means Louisiana uses the published ACT college and career benchmarks as our measure of college readiness, despite the fact that not one public university in Louisiana uses those in their admission standards. ACT benchmarks are just that, benchmarks. They're not a definition. ACT actually has a published definition of college and career readiness, and it has nothing to do with test scores or benchmarks. ACT defines college and career readiness as the acquisition of knowledge and skills a student needs to enroll in and succeed in credit-bearing first-year courses at a post-secondary institution without the need for remediation. So according to ACT's definition, a student completing college remediation while still in high school would be college ready, and a student completing dual enrollment courses in English and math while still in high school would be college ready. During my testimony in June, I pointed out that although the department reported that 26% of students on the top university pathway are using their WorkKey scores in place of ACT scores, the information was not disaggregated by race or economic status. And I'm not aware that anyone has looked at the potential for disparate impact on at-risk subgroups or negative potential unintended consequences for these 11 students. On July 25th, I sent an email to the department asking 9 questions about these 11,000 students. Who are they? How many are economically disadvantaged? How many of them are minority? How many of them enrolled in a 4-year college? What do you expect to happen to them as a result of this policy change? What will happen to them if their ACT scores do not rise? Do you expect schools to move them to the career diploma track or take the 0? Will there be 11,000 students fewer receiving university diplomas? Will there be 11,000 fewer students in Louisiana eligible to go to a 4-year college?
Thank you, sir. Members, we have a substitute motion on the floor to refer the original item to October. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, is there any objection to the substitute motion? Dr. Davis.
I'd like to be consistent.
Is there any other objection? Hearing none, the substitute motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 54, item 7.6, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, Louisiana School District and State Accountability System regarding alternative school accountability. The department's recommendation is to approve a declaration of emergency effective August 18, 2021 for a period of 180 days or until adopted as a final rule and approved as a notice of intent.
Get a motion. Ms. Holloway, just a second. Ms. Boucher. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to offer a motion to defer on this item until October.
Got a motion on the floor. Substitute motion on the floor. Got a second? Ellen, any discussion on this motion? Ms. Boucher.
Can I ask Mr. Garvey maybe to listen to the presentation? I see this is an emergency rule. I think it has something to do, I don't know if it's Ms. Baer or Ms. Noel, something to do with some of the alternative schools like the NET or whatever, the way kids are classified. It would hurt those particular alternative schools. And could we at least just hear from them first?
Dr.
Absolutely.
Dr. Jennifer Baird can provide that information.
Good afternoon again.
Dr. Baird, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. We introduced an alternative school accountability model a couple of years ago, and as we ran it according to policy, we identified a couple of areas where schools were doing great things and we weren't recognizing them appropriately in the policy. So we have three changes that we were requesting that we make. The first is that the DCAI index table was written for a full year award, when in fact what we're doing here is awarding per semester. So what was happening is students were only there a semester and yet they couldn't earn 7 credits in a semester. They typically don't earn 7 credits in a semester. So the table just needs to be fixed to match a semester earning. The second that we were asking for is the first one was actually the core academic credit index. And so essentially what was happening with the first, and I apologize, the first took them out of order. The first one was the core academic credit. And so essentially what was happening, we were saying students had to earn so many credits to get 100 points, 150 points. What happened was we had seniors who came to these alternative schools who didn't need more than 1 or 2 credits in order to graduate in a core area. And so they were essentially awarding the school a 0, just simply because they didn't have credits to earn. So we were asking to have those students just taken out of the index so that we're not dinging a school for something that we didn't intend. The second was the DCAI, which I previously mentioned. And the third is that we have a group of students who don't fit the category for inclusion. So essentially when we wrote the original policy, we asked for all 12th graders to be included in the Credential Attainment Index. That Credential Attainment Index works exactly like the high school strength and diploma index, with one really big exception, and that is that we don't use the official cohort graduation membership to calculate it. We use 12th graders, and that's different. Some kids take more time to get to grade 12, some kids take less, so they're not necessarily in the cohort. So we defined that as all 12th graders, but we also went back and said, let's grab all those 11th graders that graduate out of grade 11. They don't make it to grade 12, they graduate out, and so we want to capture that. Unfortunately, we also have one additional group of students that were getting thrown out of the model, and that was students who started grade 11 in the beginning of the year. They are changed to grade 12 in the middle of the year, and then they graduate. So just by nature of how they matriculated through, they were not getting included in the model, and we elect to include them as well. So those are the 3 primary things we were trying to fix, because the model just doesn't work well, and it was negatively affecting schools.
Can you help me understand the emergency nature here, and if this item were deferred, and how would that impact?
So essentially, we've been doing some adjustments during data certification just to make this work for everyone, but we'd like to make it.
If we were to defer on this until October, would some of these students not graduate this year?
If you wait until October, and we calculate school performance scores, we would be still using the old rules.
But this affects school performance scores, it doesn't.
For alternative schools, yes.
So it doesn't affect the graduation of the students?
No.
Okay, so it won't affect their graduation if we defer this until October?
No.
Thank you.
Do you have a public comment on this one? Ms. Millie Harris wishes to speak. Harris, brother.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Millie Harris, Executive Director of JCFA. We operate one Type 1 charter school in Jefferson Parish. We operate 2 other Type 2 charter schools, one in Lafayette and one in Jefferson Parish. July marked the start of JCFA's 12th academic year, and I wanted to take a moment to thank Jennifer Beard and her team, as well as Rachel Bunch and the LDE for their continued support of alternative schools and the development of a strong accountability system to support our students. While alternative schools and programs represent a small number of schools, I feel the students we serve are the students with the greatest opportunity for growth that will positively impact their communities. The LDE's commitment to ensuring that all students are served in rigorous environments with supports aligned to student development and academic achievement provides for continued growth in alternative education. This recommended change may be small, but it represents the LDE team's willingness to keep improving alternative education and accountability. I encourage you all to support this change and to continue the support and development of strong alternative education and accountability. And for us in particular, our Lafayette School is up for renewal. So the changes in this accountability system may impact what our scores could look like coming to you all for our renewal. So we absolutely ask that you all please consider this and consider it in a way that can benefit all alternative schools and show the state the work that we're doing with students in the most appropriate fashion. Thank you.
Before you check out, I just want to confirm Mr. Gardy's question, does it apply to you as well? If the board were to defer this one, it would not impact your students graduating this year, is that correct?
It won't impact my students graduating, but it may impact the data that you all receive on how well we serve students when we come to you for renewal of our school.
But if we cover that in October, then you should be okay.
No.
Can you help us understand that?
So yes, right now what Jennifer was talking about is they're going through data certification. It's actually due pretty soon, so it's going to determine how you count students, which students count in the mix, and how much they count for in that mix. So codifying the policy would allow them to fully represent all of the students that we serve appropriately, as opposed to not necessarily being able to use the policy and include those students or award those points for those students. So we may end up with a lower score and potentially a dramatically lower score.
That goes back to your renewal application, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Mr. Morris, I'm sorry, but if Dr. Peterson's here, I know she spoke with us about what would happen if we follow through the accountability system, school performance or letter grades, or if not, what could happen? I mean, she had a plan laid out, so maybe that plan, Dr. Roman?
We were going to, yeah, I mean, we had in our plan tomorrow during my comments, just to talk a little bit about how our renewals and extensions are being impacted and how we're thinking through that. And so that was scheduled for tomorrow, but if it's
There's
preferable.
accommodations like for what she's talking about.
Well, I mean, ultimately the board's going to have to make some decisions around how we handle renewals and extensions, and we were going to update the board tomorrow on how we're thinking through that as a leadership team.
Hand it out.
Is your preference, Mr. Morris, that Dr. Peterson go ahead and give that update now? I mean, we can easily do that.
Well, I think that depends on Mr. Garvey's motion. Mr. Garvey, after hearing this testimony, do you still want to keep that motion on the floor to defer, or do you feel differently now?
I think that whatever difference this could make, we could take that into consideration when we discuss the renewal of this charter. Instead of changing the system, which affects all these other items, we can take it as just as it applies to this charter when it's renewed.
Then I think it might be appropriate for Dr. Peterson to offer a few comments this time of how we're thinking through renewals and extensions. But it's a challenging conversation, and we know that across the country, people are having systems and states are having to think about this. And so we've worked a good bit to try to think about this on our team, and Dr. Peterson can certainly give an update report.
Good afternoon. So we have talked about charter renewal and had the opportunity actually to work with a work group, different charter leaders as well as authorizers to really get an understanding both locally and nationally how renewal will look given all of the situations that impact renewal. What we've thought about that is two different ways and two pathways specifically. And I want to be very specific that the way that we are thinking about renewal really is around our BESE authorized schools, so our portfolio schools that BESE authorizes. This year, coming up with the renewal cycle, there will be 18 schools that are up for renewal. 4 will be in their initial renewal, 12 in their subsequent renewal, and then 2 have their initial extensions. And so when we think about renewal alongside the waiver, the way in which that we've been thinking about that is specifically thinking about it as related to being able to provide a minimum of a 3-year contract term for all of our charter schools that are up for renewal. And again, this is the BESE authorized charter schools. And so when we think about that, that is specifically thinking about looking at our 18-19 scores to see where they all land. We do have approximately 3, I believe it's either 3 to 4 schools that would have received a 4-year renewal term if they were renewed for 18-19. And so what we want to do is to make sure that those schools are not penalized for being able to be in this situation where we know the scores were impacted and being able to allow them to move forward with that 4-year renewal. Our other schools, however, would receive those 3-year renewal terms. In the event that there are additional concerns that we have, both academic, organizational, and financial, for each of those, we would do a comparative analysis, taking into consideration what the school scored, their individual scores, how they compare to their system, which they're located in, as well as statewide for the academic comparative analysis. We'll also look at historical context of your organizational and financial metrics as well to determine if there's any issues there. And at that point, that 3-year renewal will be the bar, and then any type of additional oversight that we seek based on any trends of their academic information or organizational financial would be part of the conditions for their renewal. But that means that we would be giving 3-year renewal terms for any school that would then receive that initial 4-year. Everyone else would have a minimum of 3-year renewal and an additional oversight if needed based on the results of a comparative analysis and historical analysis.
So this would impact type 2 schools and RSD schools, is that what I understand?
Correct. So just your BESE authorized schools.
Okay. How would type 1 be impacted? How does that work?
Yeah, so the renewal standards in 126 specifically are related to our BESE authorized schools, so we don't have renewal standards for our type 1s, our locally authorized schools. What we have decided to do is to really make sure that we are able to provide our authorizers who are not in addition into part of that working group to make sure that we provide them guidance on how to think through their renewals the way in which we did, because we recognize that they have to take into consideration their own portfolio and their local context, make sure that they make the best decisions there. So we don't have any impact directly on the local authorizers. However, we are going to share with them our guidance on how we made the decision in hopes that they would be able to think about those things backwards.
So basically, I understand it right, the department is going to provide some sort of recommendation for a work process, but the ultimate decision is by the LEA for the type 1.
But yeah, it's on them at the LEA decision.
Thank you. Members, that's a lot. Any questions or comments? Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Mr. Garvey, ball back to you. Do you want to keep the substitute motion on the floor? Or?
Yeah, I still think we can address this issue, these point issues, but they'll be taking a lot into consideration when these charter schools come up for renewal, such as what happened this year, the test that last year, we just took. The year before, we didn't take any tests. There's going to be a lot of things we take into consideration, and I think this can be one of them. So, yes, I'd like to keep the motion on board.
Dr. Rowley, any other comments before we,
No, sir. Just want to thank Dr. Peterson for offering her comments today on schedule as opposed to tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a couple of comment cards. Either wish to speak. Dr. Candy Pope supports the recommendation, and Mr. Michael Falk also supports the recommendation. He does not wish to speak. We have a motion on the floor. Any objections to the motion? Dr. Davis? No objection. Motion passes. Thank you. Next item.
The next item is on page 58, item 7.7, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, Louisiana School District and State Accountability System regarding an Interest and Opportunities Index. The department recommendation is to approve as a declaration of emergency effective August 18, 2021 for a period of 180 days or until adopted as final rule, approve as notice of intent, and authorize the department to make revisions to the S estate plan.
Get a motion, please. Motion is not going to be voted. Can I get a motion on this one, please? Motion, can I get a second? Dr. Davis. And before we get any comments, just like to be clear on this one, as I understand it, personally, this is something I've been lobbying for, to include the STEM component into interest and opportunities. I think that's very important. There's tremendous emphasis on providing STEM education opportunities for children in Louisiana. This will help to incentivize the level of engagement. And I'd like for the board to consider endorsement. Any additional comment? Mr. Gardner?
Yeah, I concur with your opinion on that. We should endorse this.
Thank you. Yes, the approved motion is on the floor, if I understand. Okay, do we have any additional comments on this one, Ms. Ellis?
Well, I did want to just make a motion to direct the department to bring a policy forward in relation to Bulletin 111. I want to direct the department to bring policy in October regarding the delay of the transition scale for the next 2 years. This is for the overall rating scales. They're supposed to be adjusted this year. And so this was the best place to fit it in. It was.
Yes, we've got 3 separate recommendations on the side, right? Is that what we did?
Well, she's going to make a subsequent motion to this, to the one on the floor. And she's.
So you want to make a substitute motion to?
No, that's a subsequent.
Substitute, okay.
So it's right there.
This is going to be my first subsequent motion.
No, me too.
So I'm looking for help on the work process for a subsequent.
Let's do the first one first.
Okay. So we've got 2 motions on the floor.
Just one. Just one. We're gonna do the first one and then okay.
So we're going to go through the first motion and we're going to come back to the subsequent motion. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So is there any additional comment to the first motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you so much. Now we've got a subsequent motion on the floor. We've got a second. Do you have any comments?
So the motion would be to bring back policy regarding section 305 and 111.
Yes.
In October.
Is there any conversation on the board, Superintendent Brown?
Yeah, I would just like some clarification from Ms. Ellis on what exactly she's asking. I mean, she's directing the department. I would just like a little additional information on what you're asking us to do.
Well, we can't vote on it today, but I would like to bring it back in October so that we can have it on the agenda, so that we can vote on it. At this point, I would like to delay the transition scale. I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but that is what we're talking about. The pause of the baseline, whatever the terminology we've been using, but I'd like to do that in October.
Yeah, but that's not part of what is
today,
Right.
it's not any of, it's not any of this, right, which is why it's gonna come. Yes. Yes, sir. Great. Vote. Any objections?
Any objection to the subsequent motion? Hearing none, the subsequent motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 60, item 7.8, consideration of revisions to bulletins regarding the high school social studies assessment transition from U.S. history to civics. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent revisions to bulletins 118, 741, and 741 non-public, and to authorize the department to make necessary revisions to the Louisiana as a state plan.
We get a motion. Dr. Davis, a second. Superintendent Boucher, thank you so much. Superintendent Brown, do you have anything on this one?
Yeah, this is really more about, you know, our population fully appreciating and understanding civics, but also more so about what we talked about earlier around high school. Most high schools in our state teach civics as a sophomore level course and U.S. history as an 11th grade course. And what we are trying to do here is to place all of our end of course, late 2025 courses in that underclassmen years, like freshman and sophomore years. And that way junior and senior years can be, or the hope was that junior and senior years could be for career options, advanced placement coursework, dual enrollment coursework, credentials, apprenticeships, and they would not be tied to still having to have an end of course at the end of at the end of their junior year, because they would have already taken that by the time they were finished with their sophomore year. And also, it would give students an opportunity, if they weren't successful in that, they would have 2 complete years before graduating high school that they can overcome any deficit in terms of not passing that stuff.
Thank you, sir. You got public comment?
Just read it into the record.
So we've got 2 parts here. Mr. Michael Paul, who's not here to speak, but he supports the recommendation. Also, Dr. Jean Pope, who's not here to speak, she also supports the recommendation. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 67, item 7.9, consideration of revisions to bulletins in response to legislation of the 2021 regular legislative session. The department recommendation is to approve as notices of intent revisions to bulletins 130, 133, 741, 741 non-public, 746, 1566, 1706, and the BESE code as outlined.
Thank you. Can I get a motion, please? Dr. Davis, a second. Mr. Garvey, thank you. Superintendent Brown.
Yes, sir, Mr. Morris. These are essentially just to align policies with legislation that passed over the course of the last session.
Thank you, sir. We have 1 public comment card, Mr. Michael Falk, who's not here to speak, and he supports the recommendation. Dr. Davis?
I just have 2 quick questions. So on item 1 on the provisionally accredited approved school that's in the scholarship program, is that 4-year delay in removing them spelled out in statute, or did we come up with that 4-year delay? And if we came up with it, I was just curious, do we know how long the average approval time is? Because 4 years seems like a long time to have a provisionally accredited school participating in the scholarship program.
So there was an effort, along with advocates, a number of school choice advocates, to strengthen this particular program, the scholarship program, and that is the legislation that passed. And so everything that you're seeing here is in response to the legislation that actually passed.
Okay. And then my one other question is on, I guess it's E, non-public schools that receive scholarship cohort indexes. On item C, it says, beginning with the 2021 school year, a participating school that for 3 consecutive years receives a scholarship cohort index below 50 shall be ineligible to participate in the program. Is that, so beginning with 2021 for 3 years into the future, if they fail to score 50 at that point, we cut them off, or is it 3 years retroactive?
No, I believe it's moving forward.
Okay, all right, thank you.
This was part of one of the shifts that basically it now says if after 3 consecutive years of not meeting the mark, they shall be removed from the program. So there was effort on the front end to strengthen it as well as on the back end as well. That was successfully navigated its way through the legislature. The governor signed it. In fact, an additional, I believe, $1 million was also provided to the scholarship program over this last year.
So we didn't have any criteria for this 3 years now it didn't matter before with the index funds?
Yes, except this makes this much more clear in terms of what has to happen if they don't meet the mark.
Any other comments, members? Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
No, sir, that concludes your agenda.
Thank you.